Welcome back to DemystifySci. I'm Shiloh,
I'm Anastasia.
and we are on the road for today's edition of the DemystifySci podcast, which, if you're new to the show, is a place where we explore theories of how something works in the universe, which means we bring on theorists and we try to understand what their conception of reality really comes down to.
We spent so much time in science and we realized that playfulness was kind of all shut down in the academy. And we decided to create a place where we could be more playful with theories. And today is one of our most favorite, most playful scientists, Andrés Emilsson, who's been working at the Qualia Research Institute in San Francisco, trying to understand the harmonic nature of consciousness. And we've had a bunch of conversations with Andrés over Zoom. And over the course of those conversations, he's also presented on Paradigm Drift, so he's tied into the scene. And over the course of those conversations, we've really started to get deeper and deeper into the questions of what is a psychedelic experience? How are these experiences, these perceptual processes brought about by substances that in the mainstream are thought to act through the serotonin system? Like, there's clearly something else that's happening. Nobody knows who it is, and Andrés and his crew are trying to figure it out.
And ultimately, I think they believe that if they can understand that, then they can understand something about how we can fine-tune our own neurochemistry in a way that leads us to being the best versions of ourselves possible. Because in some sense, the apex of the meditation community and the psychedelic research space, it circles around this concept of enlightenment and transcendence over the ordinary realm of everyday suffering and pain.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this conversation centers around how you can arrive at the same place from psychedelics and from meditation, and both the products of that journey and also the immense pitfalls, right? Because this is when you start to mess around with your mental chemistry, when you start to say that I'm going to live differently and do either ritualistic substances or ritualistic breathing, you fundamentally change yourself. And so the conversation centers a lot around that. Like, what's actually happening when you start to mess with these systems? How is it that psychedelics and meditation appear to arrive at the same place from different directions? Is there something in the brain? Is there something that is outside of the brain? Is it field effects? Is it neurotransmitters? We get into it. Andrés is thinking about it. My favorite part of this conversation is the end, which is the smells. We close on smelling salts.
Andrés also designs incredible perfumes, and we get to experience some of those in real time. So I wish we could share the smells with you guys, but hopefully our descriptions will suffice.
If you like what we do, come join us on Patreon. You should also come join us at Beyond the Big Bang in Sesimbra, Portugal, that is happening in June of this year. Tickets are almost sold out. We're aiming for 50 people. We're at about 35 right now, and so make sure that you get your spot. And other than that,
if you already support the podcast, all we can say is thank you so much. We couldn't do this without you. If you're already coming to the conference, I'm really excited to see you. And we are moving across the world, and we're going to be filming a lot of in-person conversations along the way. So stay tuned, and we will catch up with you very soon, live in person from Portugal, June 12th to 16th.
sign up for Paradigm Drift. Next Paradigm Drift is May 9th, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. We're doing it with Shiloh's buddies from a long time ago. There's going to be live music. There's going to be good vibes. There's going to be awesome theories. Sign up, link below. Come tell us what you think about the way the world works at Paradigm Drift on May 9th.
Enjoy the conversation with Andrés. See you next time.
The scientific revolution starts now.
DemystifySci podcast.
Let us see in the dark.
Right now, we're like in a phase of our research where we're doing a lot of applied work, essentially translating a lot of the insights that we have gotten recently via some of the like legal psychedelic retreats that we have held. So I guess like I could divide it into several phases maybe, which was like of the recent QRI history. 2023 was a lot about kind of like collecting this empirical data, like going to Brazil, going to Canada, where we invited like very technical people with background in physics, like math, meditation and visual artists to kind of like try to get like a lay of the land of like, okay, what kind of dynamic systems or processes underlie different states of consciousness, and producing high quality replications where one of the artists, let's say like would be like collaborating with you in order to like replicate what your visual field might look like on mushrooms, for example, or like mushrooms combined with like stroboscopic stimulation. And the really cool thing about that methodology was that we had a very fast feedback loop, right? Like that, hey, like you just had an experience, and within 20 minutes of talking to the artist, the artist using the computer and like all the tools that they know, you get a kind of like a replication that like you both agree, hey, like this is actually yes what I experienced, and then you can get kind of like a confirmation from others around. It's like, hey, yeah, that doesn't look like my trip, or like, yes, it does. Like it's hitting on something, a commonality between us. And so we got to the point where like, yeah, we had like a bunch of visualizations and ideas for what kind of like dynamic systems may be generating them. And that was like kind of like, let's say like phase one of this like new stage of psychedelic epistemology. Then like the phase two was late 2023 and most of 2024, which was programming like hundreds of simulations to try to get at those dynamic systems.
Can I just
Yes,
ask really
yes.
quickly? Is the goal that if you can recreate some like simulacrum of this, that you better understand how it's constructed inside the mind?
Yeah. That is at a super high level. That if you can produce like pictures in a way that they are scored as like very highly rated for like, hey, this actually looks like psilocybin, for example, and you know how you generated those pictures, right? Like, I mean, there's almost kind of like several tiers. So there is like the tier where like, well, you spent months with an artist to kind of like hand paint something, right? And it's like, it captures the essence of psilocybin, but you don't know why, right? Like that is kind of like one possible tier. Another
Just
one
like
is
trial and error.
trial and error, very intuitive, very high level. Then there's kind of like another tier, which is like, hey, you combine like, for example, like Photoshop effects or something like that, or like like you use like a virtual reality simulator and you combine like pre-existing kind of like off-the-shelf like visual effects, and you go to something that looks kind of psilocybin. That is a little bit better because then you can like reference the effects that you combined and say like, okay, like what in the brain maybe creating this signal processing artifact. But then the absolute best is when you, from first principles, generate the dynamic system from scratch in such a way that like different parameters of the dynamic system generate pictures that look like states of different, induced by different substances or different meditation states. Like that is kind of...
How do you do that?
Right? That is kind of the holy grail. I wonder if I should show my computer actually, and
let's do it.
just to give you some intuition. Okay, so let me show you one of the very early things that came out of the retreat. And you may have seen this. I wonder, have you seen this before?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. So I mean, this is like a toy model. Really, it's not the super impressive visualizations that I can show you in a bit. But this is for context. So this is essentially what's called a system of coupled oscillators. So just as neurons, they're coupled to each other, right? Like the probability for a neuron to fire is a function of like other neurons firing in its surroundings and also like synaptic connections to it. You can think of a neuron as an oscillator. Like it's kind of like oscillating back and forth. The problem with neurons is that they're like very spiky and almost kind of like very discrete, right? It's almost kind of like 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, right? Like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. If you zoom out a little bit and you get to kind of like the level of populations of neurons, if you look at kind of like a cortical column or like a region of the brain where like, okay, there's like 10,000 neurons here, then the oscillations are not spiky anymore, right? Because you actually have kind of like, hey, there's a big percentage of the neurons that are like all kind of activating roughly in the same time. And so you get more kind of like a sinusoidal type of oscillation.
And this is, as far as I understand, like the theory for where brain waves come from, right? Like theta waves, alpha waves, gamma waves. It's like, it seems impossible for it to come from individual neurons, but the theory is that it kind of just smooths over these firing of large groups.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. And because in fact, right, like you could have you could have a huge amount of activity in your brain with like close to like no recorded EEG, right? Because on average, if it's just noise, for every neuron that is going up, there's going to be another that is going down, and like it doesn't add up to any coherent oscillation, right? It's just kind of like static. So if you're actually seeing these like, hey, like there's this actual kind of like big oscillations you can measure with an EEG, it does mean there's like a lot of coherence in the way like the neurons are firing together. There is an important twist here. For us, it's really important, at least because we take seriously like electromagnetic theories of consciousness. And that is that kind of the population level activity and oscillations, they're actually more than just the sum of the parts. So it's not just kind of like an average of the activity. It's actually accomplishing something. There's a precise technical reason for this, which is that cell membranes effectively work as low-pass filters. So if there's one neuron over here, and then there's like several neurons in between, and there's another neuron over there, and that other neuron just like spiked, there's no way for that other neuron to like know that, just because like very sharp kind of like individual oscillations just get absorbed through the cell membranes. Whereas if you have like hundreds of them spiking all together, and they're making kind of this like slow oscillation, that slow oscillation does travel through the cell membranes. So it's almost kind of I guess like, yeah, imagine you're like in a room or something like that, and there's like a crowd outside where like you can't really hear individual people, but you can hear like the rumblings. You can hear when people like they're all shouting together at once. So neurons can like sense that of other neurons. Plus, they can also sense very precisely whatever other neurons are specifically connected to them. But yeah.
So when you say that they can sense that sort of background noise or the crowd on the other side of the room,
yeah,
and also the ones that are directly connected to them, you think that that's not being passed through the neurons that they're directly connected to somehow? Like it's something else that's kind of... So this man, we need to introduce you to our friend Michael Hughes, who's into water, because he talks all the time about the structures of water being super, super important for transmitting information. And so my first thought is that there's something that's not a conventional neurotransmitter or not a conventional ion that's activating the neuron, right? Because neuron activation should happen when you have a synapse, and then there's some kind of molecule that opens the signal transduction pathways, and the ions flow into the neuron, and then you have an action potential. And so
it seems like it's more about timing though, right? If you're talking about these low frequency waves, like it's like groups of neurons firing all together, it makes me think of radio waves versus gaslight or something like that.
It is, but they're not next to each other, right? Like my model of like a map in the brain is that neurons have to be in contact to reach each other. And so you're saying that there's like some other feature. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can distinguish it between like synaptic interactions versus what they call it like the local field potential. And one way in which you can show that the local field potential, which is this population level activity, has like causal effects over and above just the synaptic connections, is essentially you build a model where you're measuring individual neurons, but then also you're measuring the intersynaptic medium, like in between the neurons, and what electric potential is in there. And then what you do is like you essentially use a regression analysis where you're trying to predict, okay, what percentage of the variance of the activity of this neuron is accounted for by the neurons it's connected to. And what neuroscientists find, I mean, it depends on the study. There's the type of neuron, but we're talking about something like 60% of the variance. So like, but then that leaves like a 40% of kind of like mysterious activity where like the neuron is spiking, but we don't know why. But then if you take into account also this kind of local field potential and use that as part of your model, you will get like another like 20 or 30%. So
I can't help but notice that you're still missing some percent.
Yeah. There's always some variance you can't explain in any biological system, as far as I can tell.
Okay, so we have basically the condition where you have neurons that are reacting to the ones that are touching them, and also to these local effects, and you were using that to explain the visuals.
Yes. Yeah. So essentially, the core idea here is like to think of each of these like cells like this. Okay, thinking of these cells as kind of a local field potentials, where like and that's why like their movement is kind of like smooth. You know, the actual math behind this is what's called Kuramoto oscillators. So it's each of these squares essentially, it's kind of like a clock that is like has like a handle that is like trying to move at a certain speed, but then it is connected to other clocks, and it's also trying to kind of adjust its phase to be as similar as possible to the ones it's connected to. And in this particular setup, I came up with actually like something based on those experiences, based on those retreats. The term is a coupling kernel, and that is how each of these cells wants to be the same or different to cells at different distances from it. And it turns out that like with that you can actually control things such as like the spatial frequencies and the resonant modes of the entire system. So let me show you how you do this. So to begin with, I can create like traveling waves in the following way. So like what's happening right now is that every cell is trying to be the same color as their immediate neighbors, but it's trying to be opposite color to their neighbors kind of like a little bit further removed. Right, so as a consequence, you get kind of these like traveling waves, or like this is one of the possible kind of like stable attractors.
Okay, I have a silly philosophical question.
Yeah.
So the Cartesian worldview is a metaphysics of motion, right? Like Descartes spent all of this time writing about like how the universe works, and the universe works on the basis of motion. And so I see something like this, and there's an algorithm that encodes how it wants to relate to cells that are next to it, how it wants to relate to cells that are far away from it.
Yes.
And that inherently creates motion. Descartes had to have a prime mover. He was like, God had to set it in motion. Does there have to be some sort of impulse that sets this pattern to actually move?
That's a great question. In this particular model, each of the cells has its own energy. So essentially they are all advancing at their own frequency, and then it's being corrected by the other one. So essentially there's kind of like intrinsic energy in all of them. The total energy of the system is preserved because as one kind of like loses energy by being dragged by another, the other one is gaining that energy by being dragged by it. So there is a preservation of energy, but the energy is kind of like coming from within each of the cells.
Does each cell know that it has to pick a new color every time?
I mean, each cell, in a sense, let me put it in kind of like when there's like no interaction. I mean, I would have to put it at exactly 0, but like I'll give you, this will give you a little bit of an idea. Like when the...
And for anybody who can't see, there's basically like a set of sliders that are at the top that you're adjusting. And as you adjust the sliders, the patterns change radically.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess like for the super high level, maybe for context, right? Like this is, again, is just the first toy model of like a series, hundreds that I can show you. But the main kind of like illustration here is the idea that we're trying to find parameters in a dynamic system such that by tuning those parameters, you can replicate the dynamics of different states of consciousness. So these, for example, would be kind of like a very noisy state of consciousness where like each square is like doing its own thing, and it doesn't care about its neighbors or the neighbors once removed. So
does it have to do something though? Do you know what I mean? Like, does it have to change each frame?
Yeah.
Like, does it have the option of staying the same?
Yeah, can it just stay the same?
No. So essentially, there's kind of like a global clock, and then at the very beginning of the simulation, each of the squares gets randomly their preferred natural frequency. So essentially, each of them is kind of like a clock on their own, and they're just kind of like moving. But then, like how fast they're moving is going to be adjusted by who it is connected with and how those are moving. There are other models, and in fact, on some of the more recent research that we're doing, especially for visualizing like tactile sensations, where we do a lot of dampening, which is that an oscillator only moves if you energize it, and if you stop energizing it, it kind of like slowly tapers off and like stops moving. And I think that's important for some processes, but for a lot of us, I mean, I think like even when you're asleep, right? Like there's always activity. Like the real question is less like, hey, are the neurons like firing or not? The question is like, are they firing in a coherent pattern? Right. So that's kind of like what we think like maybe the neurotransmitters are actually modulating.
So everybody's firing all the time.
Yes. It's just,
Gotcha.
if you're alive, your neurons are going to be firing.
And so the motion comes from the rules about how to fire.
Yeah.
With respect to your neighbors.
Exactly. Because like on average, I mean, like, you know, neural activity changes the kind of like the natural frequency of a neuron. But even like neurons that are not getting any inputs, they are firing at their own natural frequency. I mean, it depends on the type of neuron, but I believe like it's very common for neurons to fire something like 10 times per second, even if there's just like nothing happening around them. It's just kind of their own activity.
It's working out.
Are there states where they don't fire? Like, this feels like a dumb question. Like, if your neurons stop firing, are you dead?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Okay.
I mean, I'm wondering, like, yeah, because even for example, like heavy anesthesia, or like this is one of the fascinating. Maybe this, this is a punctual kind of like comment, maybe also very helpful for orienting the whole discussion. Is from Earl K. Miller's lab at MIT. He studies brainwaves very, very broadly with a lot of kind of like oscillatory systems, coupled oscillators. They have like some overlapping ideas. And one of the really awesome findings they have discovered is that the thing that determines whether you're in a fully anesthetic state or not is not which drugs are in your brain, but what brainwaves you have. So in fact, there's like different cocktails of substances that have like no overlapping pharmacology. It's like, okay, like these ones activate the GABA receptors, this one the NMDA receptors, and they function differently. But then the end result in terms of like brain activity is the same. In particular, like deep anesthesia is associated with a change of balance between how much the hemispheres are trying to sync up with each other versus how much they're trying to sync up to themselves. So I believe that waking consciousness, you have a lot of like interhemispheric activity where like they're trying to catch up to each other and synchronize, but they may be desynchronized within themselves. Whereas the fully anesthetic state is one where the hemispheres don't talk to each other, but within the hemispheres, they're like very synchronized. Meaning that like, even deep anesthesia is like full of brain activity. It's just like this kind of like interlocked kind of like the parts of the brain don't talk to each other, but they're still firing.
Yeah, I wonder if it's toxic to try to hold a charge for too long or something.
Yeah. It's,
like it just seems unstable, maybe. I
mean, plus I guess like some of the deeper parts of your system, control things like breathing and your heart, and like so if the activity there goes too low, as maybe something like if you overdose on like a GABA agonist, then you stop breathing and your heart stops. So you do need activity.
And so the maps that you're creating here with these algorithmic I can't say the word, algorithmic relationships.
Yes.
What do you think that they reveal about the brain?
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, we're currently at a stage where like what we're doing is like empirical research. So and again, this is just the toy model, but let's say, for example, I'm showing you like a bunch of these kind of like patterns and contrasting this one to the next one, which is looks like this. Wait, like this. Yeah. It's quite different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a checkerboard pattern, whereas the previous one was like a traveling wave type of pattern.
Can you just hold that up a tiny bit? Yeah.
Like this. So this is like a checkerboard pattern. So, I mean, I can explain that like, at least in the people in the retreats of the people who we were collaborating with a lot of psychedelic experience, they roughly all agreed that like this type of pattern, kind of like this checkerboard structure. Let me see if I can make it even more accurate. is more kind of like a DMT type of effect,
Mm.
where like everything becomes like checkerboards interacting with each other. Whereas the traveling wave type of effect, people associated more with kind of like LSD, for example. Like even just in kind of like how the energy or the feelings travel in your body, how they travel in your visual field, and so the core idea here is that hey, we have like if we have like strong effect sizes, if people like reliably say, hey, these levers set up in this way, they produce an LSD type of pattern, whereas these ones produce a DMT type of pattern, we're gaining like really useful quantitative information about how the kind of like underlying dynamics are set up. Essentially, in what way the drug is effectively changing the desire for different oscillators to couple to each other at different distances.
And this actually seems to strike at something that's really crazy about psychedelics in general, which is that if you start digging around for like what is the mechanism of LSD or psilocybin, they're basically like, I don't know, it's a serotonin receptor. And you're like, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. It's the serotonin receptor.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one thing that we've been very keen on at QRI since pretty much the beginning is this idea that really the thing that is characterizing a state of consciousness is like the shape of your experience, as opposed to actually the pharmacology. I mean, so this also goes in line with the idea that like, hey, like anesthesia has to do with like the particular brainwaves and their patterns of coupling, as opposed to like you have a GABA neuron, a GABA agonist versus an NMDA antagonist.
Okay, so this is probably the first time that I've really fully wrapped my head around this, but it's almost as if what you guys are doing is you're trying to say that there is something about awareness and like consciousness and experience, qualia, obviously, that isn't molecular. It's not just the fact that you have this little bowling ball that meets a receptor and it opens a channel and you have this signal transduction pathway that leads to gene expression.
Yes.
It's this broader, more holistic interactome that's producing the sense of phenomena.
Yeah. Maybe what I'll say now is I'll front load this kind of a little bit of like a technical specs in a sense, and we will unpack them.
Yeah.
But
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, yes, please.
Before we move past that, is it possible for people to experience these states without pharmacology altogether?
That is one of the things.
I started thinking about this thing I read. I think it was Ram Dass, one of these Westerners who in the 60s traveled to Tibet and gave, I think, one of the lamas there a bunch of LSD, and the lama said that he didn't feel different at all, actually.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, are these lamas just tripping 100% of the time, or was he just able to divert his attention away from the drug?
I have a lot to say about that.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, one is we are trying to find this out. So, for example, in the current survey that we're running, where we're showing like a bunch of these simulations and asking people to rate them by how LSD-like they are, how psilocybin-like they are, how DMT, and so on. One of the conditions that we're asking for is like, hey, have you ever done jhana meditation? / have you ever done like fire kasina? In particular, fire kasina is extremely visually intense. And
we tried it out after we talked last time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it's for people to report kind of like really intense kind of psychedelic-like visuals. The dose is usually something like 8 to 12 hours a day for like at least a week, and then that's where it really starts to get like really, really, really trippy.
We didn't try that.
No.
And I haven't done a fire casino retreat. I mean, I've done like a few smaller scale experiments, but I really look forward to. But essentially, like I have interviewed a number of people who have gone really deep. I mean, essentially the team of people who do retreats here from Daniel Ingram, who's like the writer of Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. He's a very big fan of fire casino, and talking to some of them, it does become pretty clear that there is like very, very big overlap with DMT phenomenology and psilocybin phenomenology. But that hasn't been proven yet. It's just kind of like people report that. It's like, hey, like it felt like DMT relative to something that I've experienced before. However, with the methods that I'm going to be describing, we think we can actually give like a real kind of like strong answer to something like, hey, like Fire Casino produces visuals that are like 70% LSD like, 80% psilocybin like, or maybe, we will be able to rank substances by how similar they are to like Fire Casino. And I think that will tell us a lot about like, hey, like what is the actual mechanism of action? From like receptor, like finding what receptors are implicated. But even I think like more relevant is like how the coupling dynamics change. Again, because the ground truth for a state of consciousness, I believe, is not, hey, your serotonin is up. The ground truth is more, hey, these are the coupling dynamics that are going on.
And so it seems like from that hypothesis, maybe the Lama was experienced. Even though he hadn't experienced the pharmacology, he was experienced with the shape of the experience. And so it wasn't foreign, perhaps. Because, if somebody who's never had a psychedelic experience at all, or even cannabis or something, experiences this for the first time, it's completely overwhelming and novel to them. But if you had spent a lifetime meditating in these states, it would have been accessed somehow in a different route.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there is a couple of things I'll mention about that. One is really heavy doses of meditation seem to very clearly have like overlap with psychedelic states of consciousness, at the very least in the domain of like intensified experience. Even just like speaking from personal experience, when I've done like jhana retreats, at about like the halfway point, which is like 8 days of like an average of like 8 hours a day of meditation, I would compare the baseline intensity to something like a gram of mushrooms. The feel for me is different, but there's overlap, and even to the point. I mean, one of the things that does definitely happen on meditation retreats is like you get tracer effects, for example. That is one of the things that we're also trying to quantify and show. Let me just show you that, because it's one of the, I would say, like maybe important contributions of the Qualia Research Institute.
This is one of the early things that I saw from you guys. It was just such a cool little. I think it wasn't the widget that I saw. I think you had them like individual gifs of it.
Oh yeah, okay, yes. So right now this is a tool you can access online. If you Google like QRI tracer tool, you will find it. And it's the way I kind of like describe it is like it's kind of like a Photoshop for visual tracers, where you can kind of do a lot of things to them, right? Because like people say like, well, things were kind of like lingering in my visual field. Yes, but what was the texture of it, and how long did it linger? And for example, did it oscillate? Did it change color? Like this is a very important effect, for example, that we have found. I don't know anybody else kind of like scientifically reporting this. But essentially we found, like, by comparing the Brazil retreat and the Canada retreat, that classic psychedelics like ayahuasca and psilocybin produce tracer effects that have like alternating colors. So if you have like a blue ball, if you're high on mushrooms or ayahuasca, you will see the blue ball alternating kind of like blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow. Whereas 5-MeO DMT is solid colors. So 5-MeO would be more like this, like it just doesn't change color. It may have a little bit of kind of like a rainbow hue and some transparent effects that this tool cannot replicate, but we're working on like being able to do it.
That's okay. So it's really interesting that a substance could change. It's not really the color of something; it's just the memory of the color of something.
Yeah,
like that's insane.
Is the way in which the after image evolves over time.
Yeah,
that changes. And I mean, for me, actually, the tracer effect broadly, like this idea that like, hey, on psychedelics, things last longer. I think this is a really kind of like core aspect of the experience. Like, I encounter a lot of psychonauts who kind of like almost dismiss kind of these low level effects as like not that important. I mean, they say like, well, the important thing of psychedelic is that you can meet spirits, or you can meet God, you can go deep into your heart and whatnot. The visual effects, I don't really pay attention to it. My claim is that, well, okay, maybe if you're not a very visual person, that I don't care, that doesn't matter, but seriously, pay attention to the body feelings. They also have a tracer effect. Like, I think like the reason why on LSD your whole body feels much more intense is because you literally have like tactile sensations lasting longer. And the particular way in which they last longer determines a lot of the texture and the feel of the experience. And I actually think that, okay, like in small doses, I mean, both DMT and 5-MeO DMT are like really powerful, right? So like even this level of tracer may be like a moderate dose, is not like a breakthrough level experience. Somebody may argue something like, well, maybe the tracer effects are like relevant for the small doses, but then like for the breakthrough, like it's just so different, so exotic that like, what does that have anything to do with it? My overall, well, claim, hope, kind of direction of research is to actually say, well, these low-level boring effects that happen in small doses, they're actually happening in much more extreme ways in higher doses. And when you kind of like take that to its ultimate conclusions, you will realize it actually has a lot of explanatory power. So the key example is precisely whether you get like alternating colors or not. So imagine on DMT, every second you're getting kind of like multiple copies of what you're experiencing overlaid on top of what your next sense of input, and it's flipping color, and it's a little bit noisy. So now imagine kind of like really taking that effect to its ultimate consequences. Really, you're taking your experience, flipping its color, adding it on top of your current experience, then taking that whole thing, flipping its color, adding it on top. You get this like recursive thing that actually converges in like really colorful fractal processes like video feedback. Whereas if it's 5-MeO DMT, what you're doing is like you're taking this experience and then copying it exactly. You're not changing the color, you're not making variation, it's less noisy. If you do that again and again and again, it eventually washes out into just kind of like pure nothingness or just like empty space. And essentially that is kind of like the two directions that these substances take you to at the extremes. So a lot of kind of like the, at a high level, the research aesthetic and the bet that we are making at QRI is that actually really precisely cataloging and quantifying these low-level effects in small doses is actually what will provide the explanatory kind of juice to make sense of what happens at higher dosages, even though it's much more complex and intricate.
But not just... Oh, go ahead.
Well, people sometimes report with DMT, they feel like they've died.
Yeah.
And so you talk about this oblivion that kind of results from the washing out, and you reach this like nothingness.
Well, DMT typically, even in high doses, has quite a bit of complexity. So even if you report specifically on DMT as opposed to 5-MeO DMT, I guess for those who are new to this, I mean, DMT is the compound in ayahuasca, and it's like they call it the spirit molecule, whereas 5-MeO DMT is like the compound in Bufo alvarius, which is like the toad in the north
licking
of Mexico.
Toads. Toad licking.
Yeah, it's not as psychoactive if you lick it. It actually comes from like their defense kind of like venom glands, and you need to squirt them on on a piece of glass that let it dry, and then like actually smoke it or vaporize it. Hamilton Morris argues, and many others, we shouldn't use the actual toad. We should just use the synthetic version. I agree. Also,
do any snakes have that venom?
Not to my knowledge, okay. No.
Sorry, we had a guy on the show a few months ago who had this whole theory of how snake venom was important in the development of humanity. And
interesting.
Totally unrelated. I just wanted to check.
No, I mean, I'd love to find out if there's a psychoactive snake venom.
I guess there are cults. There's cults that love injecting themselves with snake venom. So
wow.
There's a whole world built around that. I mean, I think it's, from what I understood, it was trying to approach the near-death experience, essentially.
Okay.
Was at least the theory for why it yields a transcendent experience.
He didn't have a ton on the pharmacology of it, but he did have a lot of evidence that people in India and elsewhere would go to clubs and would get bitten by cobras as a party drug.
Wow.
So
that's very, very, very interesting. I've never heard of that. Yeah.
I'll dig up the source for you.
Yeah. I'm just also like just finding some parameters to show you. But yes, I was gonna mention. So 5-MeO DMT is the one in the toad, and they call it the God molecule. So I mean, if you rank like kind of psychedelics by intensity and how far you can go, typically DMT and 5-MeO DMT are ranked as like the top, with 5-MeO DMT being even deeper than DMT. And 5-MeO, I mean, even just in terms of the intensity of the experience, nothing tops 5-MeO DMT. Like high dose breakthrough 5-MeO DMT is like, in terms of the raw qualia, like the brightness and how much experience you're having, I suspect it's a multiplier of like 50 or something like that.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Yeah. No.
How often does this have a negative outcome when people go that deep? Like, because there's horror stories with LSD. People, and there's definitely people I know who like probably should not be doing LSD even. I don't know like what the prevalence of that phenotype is, but are there negative experiences with people taking their minds to these really towering heights?
It is very, very common. I mean, talking to 5-MeO facilitators and also seeing a lot of ceremonies myself. I've attended many, many ceremonies. My overall impression is that like 95% of the experiences are overall like really positive. And people say like, I'm so glad I did these. Like, I'm so grateful. And like for the most part, it's really transformative in a positive direction. But there's about like 5% where like it really is very unpleasant. And typically, actually, I think it is like really unpleasant body configurations. I mean, 5-MeO DMT in particular is like really tactile, like really, really heavy kind of like body component. And
some people are barfing on DMT, right? And the ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca has a strong body load, especially higher doses, more because of the MAOI than because of the DMT. And the MAOI is the thing that makes it a little bit dangerous. If you just take DMT, it's impossible to die from it. No matter, as far as I know, nobody
like
has
cannabis
died.
Or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like cannabis, and like LSD as well. Like there might have been like 2 or 3 reported deaths from LSD, but that's people who inject like half a gram, right? Like we're talking about like
they've diluted the blood at that point.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like ruined the acid-base chemistry of the blood or something.
Yeah.
Yes. So physiologically, they're very safe. 5-MeO is also physiologically quite safe.
What about on the mind? Like, what about
exactly? It's very dangerous and sensitive. I mean, a lot to mention about, for example, the harm reduction protocols that we had at the 5-MeO retreat in Canada. But being mindful of that, one of the things that I set up. I mean, I was one of the key people organizing it, and I came up with this like schedule and protocol. And one of the things that I was very, very strict about, was that you had to go through like a very, very, very careful progression of like going from like an amount that you can't even perceive, to like first a 1 milligram experience and 2 milligram, then 3. So a breakthrough experience is like between 10 and 15. But I wouldn't allow people to go there unless they have done like kind of this like escalation of dosages over the course of like several days. And also to like, just kind of like checking with themselves how actually is this affecting them. If they're like, if there's like a good reason or motivation to go higher. For me, it's a point of kind of like very key personal responsibility to make sure that like, if I'm around and somebody's experimenting with these, that to really try to maximize the chances that they have like a really positive experience.
That seems like a good ethic in general. With these kinds of things, or really with anything that's potentially dangerous or traumatizing or stressful, right? Even if you're like taking someone rock climbing for the first time, like maybe not have them, solo a big wall, like have them do something.
We didn't climb Everest the first time.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just, I think that people really want to because it's so culturally present. It's a very, it's just popular. Like it's everywhere. People are talking about it. It's like completely in the water. Like Joe Rogan's talking about ayahuasca. Lex Friedman is going to Brazil to do ayahuasca ceremonies.
Oh wow!
It's like a Graham Hancock and
Yeah, Graham Hancock is on Joe Rogan. He's like, I've done 40 ayahuasca 70 something, right? So it's just, I think that, and almost nobody talks about the knock-on effects.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, on some level, one of the knock-on effects is that you might decide that you don't want to go back to your, B2B SaaS job or whatever. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's not necessarily a net negative for the world. But there's
like some small percentage of people though that it seems to that even cannabis or something seems like it can really derail them.
Okay, so to connect this back to where we were earlier, I think the same can also be said for meditation.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. No, meditation is like drugs. Maybe even more so in high doses, like Fire Casino, for example, like going into like 2-week, like 8 hours a day Fire Casino retreat. Like the way Daniel Ingram describes it is like, well, psychedelics is like scuba diving, like going down into the water and like meeting all these fish and corals. Fire Casino is like becoming a fish. So like you will go through these very, very, very potentially like very psychologically tricky stages. And it's actually, you're not going to come down for several days, like as opposed to a psychedelic. It's like, okay, like wait it out for a couple hours, you will be in a different space. So yeah, meditation is really hardcore actually. Like when you go to like high doses, I wouldn't put drugs as kind of like more dangerous than meditation actually.
I think it's easier to get to, right? Because I mean, if you're talking about 8 hours of meditation,
accidentally happen into.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's hard to reach that space, and so I think that's maybe why people don't think about it. But I've heard in communities of really intense non-dualist meditations where people at some point commit suicide because they're like looking for what's next. They don't see a difference between life and death, and so there's these massive transformations that happen to people's psychologies that are.
We had that one non-dualist guy on the show at some point, and this is when we were studying these, and there was a case. Or no, it was actually a friend.
It was a friend.
It was a friend, yeah, who just figured, well, if there's no difference between anything, and there's no difference between being alive and being dead, well, let's just get it over with.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I mean that is one of the things that I would encourage you to have like Daniel Ingram on the show because he really takes this super seriously. I mean, he's like a classically awakened individual, at least meets the criteria for like fourth path, which is kind of like persistent centerlessness and like no self. And we know like a number of people who like are arguably at that stage, and it's clearly a really massive kind of like improvement over the normal way of experiencing things. But yeah, I mean, he spends probably at least like a third of his book just kind of like talking about all of the things that can go wrong. And in particular, for some of the very heavy duty, hardcore transformations, is very common. We're talking about something between like 20-30% of people that they will go through like these very intense, what's called like cycles of insight, which are kind of these like 16 stages of like how things will feel differently as you're going through them. And it does have like a couple of those stages are like
like changes in the way you think and stuff.
The way in which you process information and how your attention kind of like transforms input into like a world model. And in particular, like the feeling of being a separate self, or like there being kind of like an observer to your experience as opposed to just like sensations. Like that is one of the key things that breaks down. Also kind of your internal voice and like judgment, like that also significantly goes down after these processes, but it can really spike in some points. In particular, the worst stage is it's labeled like reobservation, and it can produce kind of like suicidal level kind of psychological and physical discomfort.
Like alienation from your physical form or something like that?
Let me describe some of the symptoms. I mean, alienation for sure, but that might be kind of like more psychological component. Like there are some stages in this process, again, for like maybe like 20% of people, not everybody, like some people become enlightened without having to go through any of these. And that's fascinating. And we should figure out why there's like variability. But some of the reported symptoms are, for example, extreme irritability, extreme restlessness, kind of like mirroring like drug withdrawal. Actually, like people, it's almost kind of like you're withdrawing from a lot of kind of like band-aids and patches that you've put to kind of
Coping
like
mechanisms.
coping mechanisms, and then like you're just like stripping the band-aid, but like all of the band-aids at once, and like you can't deny like impermanence, you can't deny dissatisfaction, you can't deny the fact that there's no self, and like intellectually that sounds fun, but then like what you're actually living through that is really, really intense. And so yeah, like it is serious business, and for some people that like can last like years, which is some people are stuck there for like a decade in kind of like these really harrowing kind of like existential terror states, just through meditation, and some people need like actually very little meditation to get there. So like I don't know if it's because of past lives or something like that, but like the correspondence of like dose of meditation versus like progress in these cycles is like very variable between person and person.
That's really
I
interesting.
mean, I've met a lot of older people who speak about psychedelics like it was something they did like long in the past, but they would never like, oh, I would never do that now. Like it was. I wonder what causes that shift. Like you just become comfortable. I don't know. You become comfortable with all of these. What would you say? Like the stories that you tell yourself about who you are, and that becomes maybe more reliable, and you don't want to sort of
break the frame.
let
I mean, I
them
think
go.
that frames are necessary, and all of these load-bearing structures that you make for yourself are really necessary.
Yeah.
And when you're young, it's really easy to look at them and be like, well, let's see what happens if we rearrange these a little bit.
Yeah.
And it seems, I mean, you're probably also dumb enough to not realize what can happen if you start to rearrange them. And so as you get older and older, I think that you've met enough people where you know that bad things have happened to them, or you have things that you recognize that it's imperative that you don't look at it too much. Like I meet a lot of people for whom life is built upon not closely examining.
Have you ever watched the show Arrested Development before?
Yeah.
That's it, right? With Larry David.
Curb.
Oh, Curb Your Enthusiasm. That's it. Sorry,
Oh,
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
no,
Okay. Well, there's this like really doofy main character, and at some point, like someone offers him a joint. Like, he never smokes weed or anything, but he just takes a big hit of this joint, and then he ends up in the bathroom staring in the mirror. And he's just having this existential crisis because he's like seeing himself, for who he really is, because he's kind of an asshole to everybody, and he's just like going completely down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, like I think that you just get to. I think that this is the thing. It's obvious that minds are malleable.
Mm-hmm.
You can go around and figure out some kind of technology that allows you to like rearrange things inside of them, and that can be both really, really positive, but I think that it also runs the risk of being really scary. And like you say, you get to a place where you don't necessarily know where to go, you don't know how to get out of it, you don't know what has happened to you. I think that
you don't know how to fix all the problems you might discover about yourself or your world or your.
Or I think the world is the craziest one, right? Because I think that when you start to explore these sorts of spaces, it becomes really difficult to fit into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that I don't know how many psychedelic experiences you can have and then just go back to working at 7-Eleven. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For some people.
Some people,
we had a really, really baked and happy service person the other day somewhere we went to.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, let me see, like a couple of things to mention here. Like one is, I do legitimately think like some people just have kind of like a negative emotional reaction to psychedelics, and it might just be their own, receptome, like their own biochemistry, like causes that. I'm not a psychedelic maximalist in any way, in thinking like, oh, everybody should be taking psychedelics. And also like I'm very kind of like pragmatic in here. Like I honestly think that for long-term kind of like psychedelics for psychedelic assisted psychotherapy in particular, I honestly suspect that like the winning kind of like combinations will not be something like just pure LSD, but it will probably be something more along the lines of like LSD combined with like pregabalin or something like that. And pregabalin is like this fairly euphoric, kind of like downer. It's different than just like a benzo. It's different than just like alcohol. It also has its own kind of like kind of like emotionally opening quality. Actually, it's a little bit reminiscent of MDMA, a little bit reminiscent of GHB. Physically, very safe if you're taking it in a reasonable dose. And if you combine it with LSD, you can take like pretty high doses of LSD without the psychological discomfort.
Like without the anxiety?
Yeah, without the anxiety. I mean, psychedelics produce a lot of anxiety, a lot of which is very physiological.
Yeah.
It really is like, well, yeah, I feel kind of constricted here. Like, am I going to have a heart attack? And the answer is probably not, because for some reason they're not physically dangerous, but it really
take me to the hospital,
like,
take me to the hospital.
Yeah, essentially.
You're fine, man, you're fine. Just breathe.
Yep. I mean, but yeah, high dose LSD can be really uncomfortable, like really, really uncomfortable. I mean, like levels of psychological discomfort of like, 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 for periods of hours. Whereas I think like, combined with pregabalin, you actually do get kind of like all of these deep kind of like reconnection to your past and psychological insights and reframing of perspectives, psychological malleability without that anxiety. And I do know a lot of people, I guess, like OG hippies from the 60s who's like, yeah, no, man, like these are sacred. You shouldn't mix them with anything. But pragmatically, I actually suspect like that's much more the way to go. The other thing too is that the effect that a psychedelic has on, the following weeks and months and how you process life, how you make sense of it, I think it has a lot to do with actually what was the hedonic tone of the experience. Like if you had like a harrowing experience where maybe you processed some important trauma, there might become like some benefits to that, but also you end up with this impression of like, well, the kind of like high level perspective that I had about the universe was very negative. Right? It's like, oh, like you saw the very dark aspect of reality or something like that. And I think that's completely unnecessary. Like you can absolutely process like very unpleasant emotions and situations without actually having to kind of change your worldview towards something like kind of like negative and grim. And I think like the key determinant is actually, was there bliss or not during the experience? And I mean, for me, ideally, any psychedelic experience should be as blissful as possible. That is kind of
what are some hacks for that? Like for me, it's music. For me, it's music.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
I was like had some cannabis the other day when I was like went to see some friends, and this guy was telling me a story about how he spent some time in jail, and he was telling me about like these horrible stories about jail. And we were smoking a spliff, and I started to feel like a little bit like sort of like I was feeling the being in the jail and everything. And I was starting to feel that kind of like anxiety, that you sometimes get from psychedelic experiences. Yeah. And then I just pick up my saxophone and I just like start to play some music. Yes. And like there's something about the music for me which makes this very comfortable space of bliss for me. All of a sudden, like I can just get there very quickly. But I wonder, like, is music? What else can people use?
There's a bunch of things I can. This is maybe good harm reduction kind of a segment.
I'm just curious.
I mean, there's like pharmacological things. In general, the following drugs I'm going to list is generally unwise to take. Especially, do not take them every day because they produce like very, very, very severe, dependence and withdrawal. But I think every once in a while combined with a psychedelic is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And I actually think it's like probably really good harm reduction, because a bad trip can actually lead to like a lot of anxiety and depression afterwards. But essentially, like pregabalin, it's kind of based on reports that I hear and talking to people, I think is probably the best one.
Is that available over the counter?
Not over the counter. In the US, it's prescription. In Mexico, it is over the counter. You can just go to a pharmacy and...
What's it prescribed for in the States?
Shiloh's like, what dosage do I need? How many times a day? What color are the pills?
Oh my gosh. That's funny. But yeah, no, I mean, let's say you take like a 200 micrograms of LSD, which is like a fairly decent, clearly psychedelic, like, hey, you're going to revisit your childhood type of dose. Combining it with like 300 milligrams of pregabalin will really significantly reduce the body discomfort and fear, anxiety components without, to my knowledge, really compromising in terms of like the insight and the emotional processing. To me, it almost feels like almost just just better. With some caveats, which is that if you're doing a lot of equanimity training in particular, like if you're like a hardcore in meditation and you're like training on things such as kind of like strong determination meditation, where like the whole point is to be able to be okay with the discomfort, then okay, sure, then like don't take the pregabalin. But yeah, no,
which can be beneficial too, I think. Also,
Yeah, absolutely.
like just to work through it and like reassure yourself that you can handle it.
Yeah. No, I think that's the ideal. I'm a very big fan of equanimity, especially as formulated by Shinzen Young, who he has this equation of like, hey, like suffering equals pain times resistance, and resistance is like 1 over equanimity, right? So if you have like very close to infinite equanimity, pain just doesn't get translated into suffering. That is the objective, the target. However, to cultivate equanimity, it's a gradual process where you challenge yourself with things that are just a little more painful than you can handle, a little bit more discomfort than you can handle. Because if you jump into the deep end, you're not going to gain equanimity, you're just going to get trauma. And I think that is the thing to avoid. But yeah, no, I mean, if somebody is really hardcore meditator, has gone through cycles, is like advanced, then yeah, probably skip the pregabalin. I mean, really just be okay with the discomfort, and that's great. That's probably even better. But yeah, in terms of preventing trauma, so the substances, yeah, that are pretty effective in this context is like pregabalin, phenibut. That one is over the counter. You can get online. Is like was used by Russian cosmonauts to like be able to deal with the stress.
What's it prescribed for?
In the US, it's just a nootropic. Like it's not a prescription or over the counter. I guess
Supplement.
Yeah, exactly. It's a supplement. In Europe, it is prescribed for like anxiety, depression, and dealing with stress very broadly. Again,
habit forming.
Very habit forming. Do not take it every day. Like that is one of the things that is like you can really ruin your life.
Wow.
It's like benzos. I mean, benzos is like do not take them every day. Like that's if there's one thing like
Jordan Peterson.
Benzos are like probably like even worse for a bunch of reasons. Yeah. They're not just like calming you down. They're also seems to be interacting with your mitochondria, and they cause like autoimmune disorders. So like benzos are like really in a category of their own. But yeah, the withdrawal of like phenibut, of taking it every day at high doses, it is like worse than heroin withdrawal.
Oh
like,
no!
It actually like, and it lasts for like months as opposed to just a couple of weeks. So don't mess with it. So it's one of those things where like, hey, if you take it every once in a while, it really doesn't seem to have much of a problem. Like it really is kind of the consistent use that is
really
a problem.
Interesting.
The other one is GHB. GHB is important to note is quite dangerous because the
pretty sure that's what Courtney Love used to try to kill.
Oh, that was Rohypnol.
Oh, that was Rohypnol.
Rohypnol. Okay.
Similar?
I forget. Rohypnol, I think it's the same.
I like that Andrés is like, yeah, no, those he's into the Kurt lore.
Rohypnol, or it might be a benzo, but no, I believe it's GHB. I mean, GHB, quite a wonderful, used every once in a while. I mean, it has MDMA components, kind of like sociability, love components. The problem is like it's easy to overdose. Like if you triple the active dose, you may die. So like that's why like I think it probably shouldn't be accessible to the general population because people don't know how to dose their their stuff. But GHB and psychedelics, they synergize really well, and like you can take like breakthrough DMT levels on GHB, and like it's like, wow, I'm talking to the alien and I'm getting this download, but for some reason I'm not freaking out at all. And then the fourth one is gabapentin, which is also, I believe, is also prescription in the US, but in Mexico you can just go to any pharmacy.
What about non-pharmaceutical?
Yes, exactly. So non-pharmaceutical. One of the key premises, I mean, this is also OG QRI, as it were, some of the early things we were proposing at QRI, is this idea that, hey, like the negative valence of experience has to do with the structure, with the dissonance of your experience. So we instinctively kind of like reach out for like changing meaning, right? Like change is like, how am I thinking about this that is causing me stress? But you can also just like reach out, how do I reduce the stress directly? And introducing harmonious patterns is like the most straightforward way of doing it. Reducing resistance is the other one, which is like equanimity, really, really powerful. But again, you need to practice that, and it doesn't come automatically. But yeah, harmonic patterns. I mean, like music.
And that's like getting out of your own way. Like just let it happen.
Just let it happen.
That I speak from experience. I feel like that might be the ingredient of difference in like the way that Shiloh and I encounter the world. I grew up in a really dissonant household.
Okay.
And like we're staying with them right now, and so it's really funny because I'm like, yeah, like you can't resist this experience. Like you just have to wash over you, and it'll be okay, and just accept it. And it does genuinely.
Well, there's things in life you can't control, right?
A lot of them, yeah.
And it's better not to stress out about the things you can't control. It's kind of a waste of your energy and your attention and everything anyways.
Yeah.
Seems like good training.
But I do think that it's really hard because there's this huge aspect of it. Well, it shouldn't be like this. Like it should be different. And so that's a lifetime of trying to optimize.
So reduce resistance, reduce stress.
Yeah. Introduce harmonic patterns. I mean, like one of the things I recommend, for example, if you're gonna do DMT, even forgetting about like pharmacological aids, which again, like only every once in a while, like GABAergics, very, very important to be sparingly. Very, 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 very important. I actually think that like developing a benzodependence is so much worse for you than, for example, having like a very serious bad trip. And like it really is like a quality of life, like massive hit. So anyway, just to make sure. But something I've heard quite a bit of success for is like the following protocol. So it's like, let's say you want to have like a DMT breakthrough experience and you want it to be a positive, like enriching experience. What I would recommend is to do the following, which is start with like 10 minutes of breath work. I mean, just put on like the Wim Hof, like kind of like guided breathing meditation on YouTube, which is like a 10-minute thing. That kind of like warms up your body, maybe opens up your blood vessels, causes these like nice kind of like harmonic waves, and it lowers the sense of resistance. I mean, like just by doing that process, you're kind of like being able to relax and let go, even if there's like some psychological or physical discomfort. So that's like a really, really good like kind of like bed. Then for 10 minutes, do loving kindness meditation. Again, there's also like playlists on YouTube, or you can do it without it. I would recommend a little bit of music, but like, just like spend 10 minutes like desiring love for yourself, happiness for yourself, for your friends, family, the whole world. Tune into the feeling of love. And then for another 10 minutes, equanimity, which is, you can put on some like, Buddhist chants or, Hindu chants, so something kind of like spiritual, and just focus on don't resist.
Yeah, does that word mean like being like melting into your experience? Equanimity is like kind of being a part of something bigger. What does that word mean?
I suppose, yeah.
Sorry to be an idiot here.
No.
I've not used that word a lot.
Equanimity.
I think that it's just the acceptance of things that you can't change. You're like, I want this. I think for me, it's like, it would be nice if it was different, but it's not. And there's absolutely no sense in spending any energy or frustration on it. Is that close to it?
Yeah. I mean, Shenzhen Yang probably uses in a fairly technical way, having to do with like not resisting, but very broadly it is pointing to that. The etymology, according to Google, is the combination of aqueous and animus, or like animus is like mind and aqueous is equal. So it's kind of like equal mind or balanced mind, fairness, impartiality. I mean, there is also like a jhana, and there's a specific meditation stage that is called equanimity as well. And like the key characteristic of that state is very close to indifference, but it's not indifference. Because like indifference is almost kind of like you're dissociated, or like you don't care. Equanimity is like you open up to it no matter what it is.
Yeah, it's like I think that it has this component of like an appreciation for experience, which is that it doesn't matter if the experience is bad. It doesn't matter that the experience is good.
Like trusts in.
It's literally just the for me, and like I the way that I embody it is just the fact that the experience, having experience is better than not having experience, and so I have this mindset of the world where I'm like, well, this will be interesting. like it might not turn out the way that I want it to turn out. And that because I think that resistance comes from desire, right? You point yourself at something and you're like, this is what I want.
Expectation.
And then as the current of the world moves you in some direction, you're fighting it because you're like, no, I don't want to go over there. I want to go over there. And so equanimity for me is just being like, no, we're just going. And just like go look around, like smell the air, touch the leaves, like experience the process.
Yeah.
Get stabbed, like whatever's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
In the very technical meditation sense, which is probably helpful for like dealing with unpleasant psychedelic states and meditation, is I would describe it as you don't use either attention or body tension to try to control the experience. So you're not trying to kind of like reframe, you're not trying to like turn away, you're not trying to ignore it. So you're not doing any of those movements, and also you're not like tensing your body or kind of like actively trying to kind of like shift your pose to prevent the negative sensations from spreading. So effectively, most people, overwhelmingly majority of people, if they feel kind of like something painful, you will notice like they kind of like tense around it. Almost they're trying to quarantine the feeling, if that makes sense. They're kind of like putting tension so that like the unpleasant vibrations like bounce off and they don't propagate to the rest of the experience. Whereas, I mean, which locally, in the moment, it does reduce the net amount of negative sensation, right? Like you're kind of like quarantining it and you're protecting the rest of your body. However, if you train to relax and let the sensation spread, no matter if it's pleasant or unpleasant, a series of processes get kickstarted where you eventually actually become much better able at dealing with the unpleasant sensation. And one of the key ones that I have identified, at least through self-observation in meditation, is that when you allow negative sensations to just do whatever they have to do, you will find out that like your whole body actually kind of like works to dissipate that stress. Like there might be like a very unpleasant sensation in your arm, let's say. If you approach it with a lot of equanimity, you may literally feel that sensation connect to your chest and then being healed through your chest. Like your chest is kind of like becoming like a radiator or like a stress dissipation machine or something like that. But this is a training process, right? Like you need to experience this many, many times over, such that like, hey, you eventually develop these like channels through which like stress can become like very efficiently dissipated.
Well, yeah, because I think that with stress or negative experiences or anything bad, there's the feeling that if it goes bad, it'll never be good again. And so I think that there's a lot of grasping and straining around that. And that probably helps because we were talking about this in context of the DMT experience.
Yeah.
Where I think that this was the third step, right? So it's breathing, loving kindness meditation, equanimity meditation. And that's important because if it goes bad, like it's going to be okay.
Yes.
Right? That's the whole point.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking nature also does it for me as well. Like there's something about being in the forest, which I feel like sort of like your arm connected to your chest. I feel like somehow connected to like something. I don't know what it is. There's so much life everywhere surrounding you. Like the ground is alive. You see the bugs and the little plants and...
I wonder about this though in context because I know people that are terrified of the woods.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
they go into the woods.
Most people are probably terrified of playing the saxophone too.
Exactly.
But like both of these things are like deeply comforting to me for some reason. And when I'm in that angst, I feel that anxiety, like that psychedelic anxiety or any anxiety.
I believe this has been actually studied. Like I remember, I'll have to look it up. I forget the research lab, but I do remember like a survey study of psychedelic users. Where they were like trying to determine factors that predict unpleasant experiences, and actually taking the psychedelic in nature was like protective. I suspect there's like interpersonal variability though, because for some people the forest is really, really scary. And I'm like very open to like both options. Were like, hey, like maybe yes, you're kind of like hooking up into the electric grid of life, so to speak. The other option is that, hey, actually just like exposure to the type of inputs that are present in a forest actually does help you kind of like dissipate stress. And I think there's like a good reason that like, hey, even if, hey, it's not the forest that is helping you dissipate stress, is your internal model of the forest. That like if you're seeing these trees and they have these branching structures and fractal like, hey, actually those are very good radiators of stress. I don't know if this makes sense. I mean, it's like you're swallowing the forest inside you, and that representation, that internal model, actually has like a lot of like nice properties that actually are.
I always experience this really profound closed circuit of life out there too, where I like there's dead things dying everywhere, but there's things being born everywhere at the same time, and I see this almost like closed loop of life when I'm out in the forest, which is like very comforting because I wonder if there's like something like the thing that people are most afraid of, I think, is when they're children and they learn that they are going to die someday.
Yes.
And so it's almost like our fundamental concern is that this will come to an end. And there's something I feel so reassured by in seeing like those, it sounds so cliche, but like seeing that cycle everywhere and seeing like the continuum across all the life forms.
That's a pattern that's, it's a pattern that's stable.
It's
right?
stable,
Like if you go into the woods, especially old growth woods, you're like, they've been working on this for 100,000 years, in some places 1,000,000 years.
Yes.
And it's been like this. And they've figured out the balance, they've figured out the harmonies, everybody knows where they're supposed to be. And you show up and you're like, ah. And then you go into a city and you're like, Jesus, civilization is a goddamn mess. Like we haven't figured anything out. Like we don't understand anything. Everybody's like, I drive around the Bay Area and I watch people sitting in their cars for 4 hours a day trying to commute to work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the idea of that.
There's no birth and life, or sorry, no birth and death in civilization.
Well, there is here.
Well, you don't, like, babies are born in hospitals, people die in hospitals, like, it's,
I was just pointing to all the graveyards around.
Oh, yeah, we are in a huge graveyard, huge. We went to a Home Depot in a graveyard earlier.
Nice, yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think that becoming aware of these cycles and being
maybe plugging into the bigger circuits as well, I wonder.
Yeah, and like the idea of the shape of the forest somehow also being dissipative to stress is interesting too, where you have these, like if you look at the way that a tree is built, it seems to be built perfectly in order to be able to both radiate heat and to absorb energy, and it's got all of these perfect shapes that are somehow...
Speaking of stress, do you think I could pee really quick?
Yeah, of course, please.
Yes.
Well, like, so Nastia actually went and wrote a story for the local paper about one of these Psilocybin clinics.
Okay, yeah.
And they're not even allowed to have them in the woods, actually.
What?
Yeah. It's like, the government treats it, like a medical clinic. Has to be like very medical clinic-like, and
I think they have to be within like X number of minutes of an emergency room.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So I don't know, it's just kind of sad for me because whenever somebody talks to me and they're like, I was thinking about coming to Oregon to try one of these experiences, and I'm kind of like, yeah, but you should just go backpacking with us instead or something.
Yeah. I bet the outcomes are like way better in in nature with friends.
Yeah, but for some people, like their friends don't do that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, it's a tricky situation because I do think that people, if they want to, should have access to these experiences. But for someone who's not integrated in a culture and community that's supportive of that, this is kind of their best shot, is to go to something like this clinical experience.
Yeah.
Because you said earlier that you weren't a psychedelic experience maximizer, where you're like, everybody should do it. And I kind of am. I'm like,
okay. Yeah.
I just...
At least once, I feel like.
Under super controlled conditions, very carefully, without just jumping into the deep end of the pool without first learning to swim. But I'm like, if not a psychedelic experience, then like a deeply meditative experience. But I think that there's something that you cannot access about your own awareness without reaching to some place where it gets real weird.
Yeah.
And we a while ago, I don't remember what this was for, but we read one William James's variety of mystical experiences.
Yeah.
And he had this really astounding section on like deja vu. Or
okay.
just because he had, you know, like the saints and the hermits and all of the conventional things that you would associate with a mystical experience.
Mhm.
But then he also was basically like going for a walk and noticing the light in the trees
Mhm.
is a mystical experience. And I just
Can be.
it can be. And so I think that I want everybody to be able to have a mystical experience, because I think that it ties you to what it means to be alive in a way that is so reassuring and calming. And so maybe it's not that I'm a psychedelics maximizer, maybe it's that like mystical experience maximizer. I'm like, I think there should be mystical experiences for all on tap. Like, I think that's my worldview.
I think, I would agree with that. I mean, I think having like a felt sense of like the interconnectedness of everything, it's quite essential. And I think like if you don't have that, then like sincerely you may think like your only duty in life is to maximize, you know, the power of like your country or nation or your, you know, a small tribe. And like I do think like experiences of interconnectedness are like really important to kind of like dislodge that as like the one thing that, you know, it's all about.
I think that I wonder if you have any insights, or if you've thought about the effects that it has on a society. Like, how do you think it changes society for everybody to have mystical experiences, for everybody to be connected to psychedelics or something adjacent? Because it seems like it's hard for me to imagine society becoming more violent, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't really know anybody who does psychedelics and then is violent. Are there violence-inducing psychedelics?
No, but I mean, if people have like a psychotic break or like depersonalization, definitely violence can happen like acutely, but it's rare.
But even the way that you're describing that, you're like, they break.
Right.
Like you can break a person and then they'll get violent, and I'm like, sure, but it doesn't seem like a rational side effect of a mushroom trip in the woods where all of a sudden they just become more violent as a consequence of it.
No. I mean, I think similar to like cannabis, like tends to mellow people out as a side effect. I mean, I think it has to do with like it makes you more internally. There's a kind of an enhancement of a consistency drive. It tries to. This relates to like the QRI model of neural annealing, where like you're actually gonna, by energizing yourself and like cooling down slowly, you're finding all of the internal contradictions and like figuring out a way to like reconcile them. And I think like a lot of like, you know, violence and antisocial behavior actually comes from like having like irreconcilable internal differences, or like irreconcilable internal conflict that you're not even aware of. I mean, like think of like, I guess, like homophobia, for example. Like it's actually very common for somebody who is like violently homophobic to actually have like same sex attraction that they're like in denial of, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Especially among senators.
Exactly. The more power, the farther they fall. Did we mine out this vein?
Yeah, back to the technical details.
Well, there's a couple of things maybe yet to circle back. One thing I did wanted to point out is in the connection between like meditation states and meditation progress and psychedelic states. I do think we have to be cautious about the idea that, hey, like psychedelics take you to the same place as like deep meditation. And or, I mean, in particular, something that I think is very important not to fall into is thinking of like not reacting to psychedelics as a kind of like test of enlightenment. Because I do know like one person, for example, not in our community exactly, but like who is known to kind of like have a pretty much like harassed every meditation teacher in our circles, because this person like believes they're enlightened. And the only evidence they have is that they can take like massive doses of psychedelics and they don't feel any effects. But actually, the person is like very obviously a grandiose narcissist. And it's very obviously not the case that the person is enlightened.
Oh.
But for some biological or biochemical reason, they have like really subdued responses to psychedelics. And but he uses that as kind of like to convince recruits that like, hey, I'm enlightened, and look, I can take like 100 mics of acid and like talk to you coherently without problems. It's like, no, like you just have like weird biochemistry. Like this is not not a test of any sort. And then on the flip side, I actually know maybe about like half of the really advanced meditators that I know, they actually are hypersensitives to psychedelics. So I think it actually can go like both ways. Like I know like Daniel Ingram, like the slightest amount of mescaline and he's like tripping out really hard, and like, you know, he's having a great time. But you would expect, if you believe that, hey, like you're already used to it because you are enlightened, that like it wouldn't surprise you. Like that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, that makes me reconsider the lama in Tibet situation. Like I wonder if this person wasn't just extremely good with managing stress.
Could be, yeah.
As opposed to like necessarily having congruent experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Or also just like congenitally not very sensitive.
Possible.
Which you know, a percentage of people just don't react strongly to psychedelics.
But there's some people that are insensitive to like even opiates.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's interpersonal variability in biochemistry. And the pattern that does seem to generally happen though is that like very, very heavy meditation experience, like maybe it doesn't correlate that much with the intensity of a psychedelic effect, but it does correlate to some extent with your ability to handle difficult experiences. And like in general, more advanced meditators are better at handling intense psychedelic experiences, just as they're better at handling like physical pain. They're just kind of like a baseline of equanimity and like being able to just not freak out in the face of difficult situations.
Does it go the reverse way? So people that are super established psychedelic, like psychonauts that have had a lot of experiences, that have had a lot of difficult trips that they've worked their way through, do they also seem to be able to deal with pain and the difficulty of life more easily? Like, are they different sides of the same coin in that sense?
I would imagine, yes. I don't know, and I don't have any hard data. I can think of like a few, like I would say like the general pattern, I would suspect, yes. Like if I were to bet on it, I would say like, yeah, there's a correlation. But I do know like some people who are like, yeah. Because there is the context, there is the case where like some people just like have like really pleasant psychedelic experiences for some reason, no matter what. But like it's kind of uncorrelated to their I don't know. I just remember like somebody who's like pretty neurotic in his everyday life, but I think maybe he just like locked out in biochemistry, where like LSD for him is kind of like this like super ecstatic thing like every time, right? So maybe in that case, he actually wouldn't have to work through difficult psychedelic experiences. He just kind of in the lucky like, hey, maybe psychedelics crosswire with like opiates or dopamine in his case or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so like a while ago, we started down this path of basically being like, okay, so there's something that QRI is trying to figure out, which is what is this other part of experience? I think you called them kind of like field effects, or what was it? Is that the term that you used?
Yeah, there's a number of things. I would say like maybe the holistic component of experience. I do have like a good maybe like recent pair of like metaphors that maybe explain this. And so one of those is laser chess. I don't know if you've heard of laser chess. You can play it online. Laser chess is essentially a combination of like kind of like a chess-like game with a laser. So the pieces now have kind of like optical properties. So there's like some pieces that function as mirrors. Some of them are like beam splitters. You know, beam splitters where like you shine a light and like part of it goes through and part of it just like bounces off. And then like some of those are like absorbers. And the way a turn in laser chess works is you make a move and then you shine the laser or you fire the laser. And then you see how the laser bounces off all of the pieces. And if one of the rays that comes out of the system hits the king of the opponent, then you win.
Did you invent this game?
No. I didn't. I think like the one that was like very commercially successful was like a version of this called Ket. K-E-T. I think like it won like, I don't know, Game Board of the Year, like award in 2005 or something like that. And
Wait, so is this digital, or are you shooting laser? You're actually shooting real lasers.
if you get like the actual like, commercial cat version of this, you actually shoot the laser every time, and like you kind
We're
of
behind in tabletop
Yeah.
technology.
Sounds really fun, actually.
So let's say, I mean, this is just a simplified case. This is a laser. This is the other person's king, let's say.
Can you raise it just a tiny bit high? You can just rest it on the top of your thigh, but if
Oh,
you're
like this?
that's perfect.
So like you shine the laser, and then like it goes, then hits this mirror, and then it goes in this direction. And okay, it misses the king, so nothing happens. But let's say in the next move, what you do is you move this piece to the next board place over here. So now the laser will actually hit the mirror, and then it hits the king, and then you win. So what's cool about this is that really there's kind of like two types of systems that are collaborating. Right, like you have this kind of like slow and very local system, which is like how the pieces of the board are put together. And then you have this like, literally the speed of light part of the system where the laser is just going to bounce everywhere, and like find some like stable equilibrium, some like standing wave pattern. And then like based on that, you win or you lose, or nothing happens. I think it's the same with the brain. I'm going to hypothesize that like neural activity is kind of like the laser chess pieces. They're they're setting the board. But then maybe 1,000 times per second or something like that, there's like a laser that gets fired, or a light that is like turned on. And then the light just bounces off all of the walls, all the mirrors, all the polarized lenses, all of the kind of like stuff that is in there, until it finds a stable attractor. It just like converges on this like standing wave pattern. And I suspect that your experience is that standing wave pattern. Now, this is computationally like really significant, right? Because like, a Turing machine is more kind of just the pieces of the board. But like actually putting light and having the light bounce off and explore all of the possible paths at once, that's more kind of like a quantum mechanical component. It's like something that it works as a whole, is holistic. And every piece of the puzzle, every piece of the board is contributing to the final shape, right? And in a very non-obvious way, right? Like sometimes you move only one piece and the pattern changes completely. And I think it's something like that in our experience. You remove a component of the experience, and the experience has a completely different meaning because everything informs everything else.
How does this connect to what Ogi talks about when he talks about expectation as being such a key part of experience?
Yeah.
Because it seems like the pieces are the interaction between the pieces and the light in this metaphor is the thing that shapes expectation. And so when you shift one of the pieces or you fire the light from some other place, you've changed what's possible for you to notice or pay attention to or experience.
Yeah. Very good question. Yeah. So, I mean, what the system is trying to do to a first approximation, it is to create expectations that match the next sensor input. You're trying to minimize the distance between what you expect and and the signals that you're receiving. And one of the key ways in which that happens is essentially through resonance. I mean, Ogi talks about this, where let's say you have kind of like you've seen a part of a painting, and you don't know if that painting has a square or a triangle, but it could be one or the other. It's kind of ambiguous. When it's ambiguous, internally you're going to be generating or putting, let's say, like a square piece and a triangular piece, and both are going to try to resonate with the input that you're receiving. And then when finally you uncover, like, oh, it's a square, the part that inside you that is representing a square will be kind of like a hit. And they're like, okay, that one actually like can couple together and resonate with the input. And so we essentially kind of like judge the accuracy of our predictions in terms of like how well the resonance happens. And I think it is there's one way of describing the laser chess setup in such a way that you get kind of like that resonance. I mean, in some sense, it would be something like you have like two layers of the board, one which is like sensor input and one which is like your internal model. Well, the input actually comes in kind of like a sparse way. It's kind of like you get like this part of the chessboard becomes illuminated, but then it goes dark, and then this other becomes illuminated, it goes dark. I mean, the input that we get is very patchy, right? Like even just like our eyes, like the information that our eyes are receiving is actually just like a fraction of the information available in your visual field, right? There's like so much that is just like being reconstructed. So it's kind of like the actual, like the final standing wave pattern of the laser is going to be kind of this like composition of your internal models, your internal pieces, and the sensory input that you're getting. And when your expectations are being like very violated, in a sense, that would cause like a big mismatch where like your pieces don't correspond to the sensory inputs. And yeah, the laser effectively will just go in strange ways that are kind of destabilizing. You don't get like a coherent picture. Whereas when your sensory input and your predictions match perfectly, then kind of like the standing wave pattern in the laser chess is going to be coherent because all the pieces are like properly aligned with each other.
Do you think that structures the ego in some sense?
Yeah. In the laser chess metaphor, actually, I would say the ego is actually kind of like regions of the chessboard where the laser converges. So usually the typical moment-to-moment experience for the vast majority of people is where actually the laser, so to speak, like actually converges in a few like very central points that become kind of the watchtower or like the control, the panel of control for the entire experience.
Because you can put something in that spot according to the rules of laser chess
Yes.
that does a tremendous amount of work, right?
Yes.
Like if you have some kind of
Reliably.
reflective component or something that like networks things together.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. You have that one, you put a piece there and you rotate it, and then like the light completely shifts in this direction. You rotate it, completely shifts in this direction. It is kind of like a central control region. The disadvantage, though, I mean, it is good in the sense that you get like a nice handle of control. The disadvantage is that these very big swings of attention cause a lot of stress. And so when you have a very strong ego, the problem is that you're constantly trying to protect it, and you're constantly relating every piece of information to it. Right? Like, because you want to maintain that point of control, you need to kind of like see how it relates to every other piece. And it's kind of all the other pieces are subordinated to it in a certain sense. And the problem there is that, that is a stressful configuration that you're trying to always control the entire board just from this like tiny region. Whereas somebody who's enlightened, in this metaphor at the very least, the chess, the laser effectively is kind of like evenly spread out throughout the board. There's no special regions where the light converges. And so, I mean, they essentially report like a loss of a sense of agency, which is crazy. Right? Like somebody who's enlightened, you ask them like, oh, who is choosing to say the words that you're saying? Or like who is choosing, like if you raise your arm, who chose it? They will say like nobody. Like it just happened. The field sort of self-organized and decided to do it, but it wasn't me. There wasn't like a sense of self that is like choosing that.
This is slightly off topic, and I worry that it'll send us down a rabbit hole. But how do you know that somebody's enlightened?
Yeah. It's
like, is there like a form you fill out and you get like a?
We really should. We really should. I mean, that should
Nobel
be
prizes and.
Oh, that would totally be like a QRI product. I think. Like,
absolutely.
Quantify your awakening level in a little
like a Mensa
quiz.
Club type thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, which is your favorite, Disney character or like, Disney princess? It's like, I mean, typically the way it's traditionally done, which I think it's has like a fairly kind of like reliable, high accuracy in a sense, is really only within kind of like monastic traditions where you have, let's say like an enlightened Zen monk who is a master, is like 70 years old, has been enlightened for 30 years, and has talked to like thousands of students, right? And one of the things that they do is like they have these one-on-one sessions where they kind of like pay 100% attention to your body posture, like your reaction to things. They might like probe you, they may distract you, like maybe even like insult you briefly, just to see how you react. And if they notice like, hey, you're flinching and you're kind of like concentrating your attention in your chest, and like, oh yeah, that's like a sense of self that is like trying to control the experience. And so it's kind of like a way of getting immediate feedback of like how you're handling your kind of like web of attention, and like whether there is like a center in it or not. I'm sure there's like mistakes. There's just no kind of like research on what is the, accuracy score, what is the F1 score of like a meditation master in predicting like, are you enlightened or not? But I do think like there is at least anecdotally really strong intersubjective agreement. What do they call it? Like a inter-rater agreement. Like two Zen masters from the same tradition. If they independently interview the same person, for the most part, they will agree on like, okay, what stage that person is at. It is also, of course, like a situation where like the environment is getting a lot of data about you, right? Like you're living with them, they're seeing you day in, day out, they see your progress and so on. Much harder to do with somebody you just like meet for the first time, and especially if they're not doing kind of like the a meditation practice or protocol that has been established over hundreds of years. Of course, it's like a lot harder. But I think like you can get somewhere in terms of like having like a team of people who have achieved these stages, interviewing the candidate, as it were, and probing, especially on kind of like low-level sensory components of experience that are not just kind of like well-known in popular culture. Because there are like some specific things. I mean, like, in fact, like last November, I went to a retreat, which was like an enlightenment focused retreat with a few friends and other people. And we were trying to come up with some kind of like protocol precisely for that. And one of the things that stand out, just as an example, is that every person that I know who has achieved this stage for the fourth path level of awakening, they can actually like spin very fast and stop spinning, and then like walk in a straight line without being disoriented.
They don't get dizzy?
So they will say that the sense of dizziness arises, but it doesn't disorient them. Which,
That's
right? Like,
insane.
I think it has something to do with kind of like, if you're identifying it with your visual field, right? It's like if you're dizzy and you're kind of grasping at your visual field is going to be dragging you along. Right? Was what they describe is like, no, they're just not attached to their visual field. Their visual field is kind of like there, but they're not trying to coupled to it. And as a consequence, even if it's like spinning very wildly, it's just not disorienting. So
that's so interesting.
There's like a parallel here that I want to explore with respect to collective consciousness or like cultural level ego or something, because if this disconnect between prediction and expectation is reinforced by something where you can trust yourself and you build a sense of ego out of it, like I have reliable predictive capacity and that's who I am, and I identify with my ability to make good predictions that match my expectations, or that things pan out how I think they're going to. At a cultural level, you experience, I'm thinking about like scientific societies, right, that have really strong allergic reactions to ideas that they're not comfortable with at first, right? It sort of challenges the consensus picture, which is almost the super ego of that culture in some sense. And then there's also really cool people, and some of my favorite people in the world, who can entertain really insane ideas without committing to them. And there's almost a sort of enlightenment of approach to ideas where you can have it wash over you without being offended by it, without being terrified by it upsetting the apple cart.
Without getting dizzy.
Without buying into it either, right? Without getting dizzy. I wonder if there's a parallel there.
Oh, I think it's very related, yes. I mean, I think it's like a strong correlation. Let's put it that way. I mean, I used to think that like maybe enlightenment was like really related to, for example, like not having any addictions. But like, I would say that's a correlation. Like in general, people become less addiction prone. But like, there's also like some famous, like there's a famous like Zen master who like almost certainly is awake. But but is like addicted to nicotine. And like to me that was very surprising. It's like, hey, this person is like irritable because he's vaping all the time, but but he's fully awakened. It's
It
like,
was funny because non-associated was actually just eating a nicotine treat. Right as you said that. We make no claims to enlightenment though, so it's okay.
No, not at all. I mean, with substances and enlightenment. Well, okay. Have we satisfied ourselves? Do we have a shared definition of enlightenment?
I'm really, really interested in the balance between ego and non-ego because I find that a properly disciplined ego is actually really productive.
Yeah.
But, like you said, there's these absolutely miserable people you run into with these narcissistic tendencies where it's obvious that, like,
That's fine.
it's obvious that they've kind of detached from the wider network as well. And there's an inflexibility in their ability to assimilate new information. And so there seems like there's a really important balance there that I'm interested in. And same for a culture, like the parallel of the consensus picture, the rigidity of encountering new ideas for society. It seems like there's a fine line between having your brains fall out of your head, between someone just accepting anything that someone puts in front of them, which could be dangerous perhaps too, and also being so rigid and attached to your ego that you can't accept anything interesting or new that might actually make the world better for you. It's like a fine line, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Robert Beer, who he wrote this book called Seeing That Freeze. His conception of enlightenment is to be able to recognize a view for what it is, so that whenever you're experiencing something, it's never just kind of like bare sensation. It's never just like bare sensory input. There's always an interpretation. There's always a view. And in fact, he wouldn't say that like enlightenment is a particular view. For him, enlightenment is being able to recognize the view that you're inhabiting and having the freedom to either switch it or stay with it. So like one view would be like, oh yeah, I'm a person, I'm an individual, I have like my reputation, I have my goals, my desires. Good. But I just have to know in the back of my head, like, hey, that's a view. That's an interpretation of my sensory stream. And it's just one of many. And I'm not caged by it. The problem really is when you're like trapped in a view. Even, for example, in meditation, like if something unpleasant comes up, it's very common for people to kind of assign an interpretation like, whoa, like trauma from the past is like coming up, right? And the moment you make that interpretation, that judgment, then you start to interpret every other sensation in terms of that judgment. And like, maybe that's not even true. Like maybe it actually was just a stomachache. Maybe it really was just kind of like, hey, you didn't sleep very well, you're just tired. And then you're like caged in your own kind of interpretation of what is going on. And you're not even realizing that you have attached this interpretation to the sensory input. And from that perspective, having a strong ego in the sense of like, hey, like defending what you think is valuable, trying to achieve your goals is perfectly compatible with enlightenment, and high equanimity and like, benevolence, loving kindness. All of that is compatible. The thing that would become, I think, incompatible would be when you are trapped by like greed, hatred, or delusion. Like if any of those things is kind of like the core motivator for what you're doing. I mean, and that usually is the case with very strong egos. I mean, like a very, very strong ego, usually it's deluded about the nature of reality because it perceives itself as kind of like a self-existing, independent entity disconnected from the rest of the universe. Okay, like that's literally delusion, right? Like they have a misconception about their nature and the nature of reality, and they're acting on that misconception. Second, they tend to have like very strong like greed, and also like very strong like hatred or like dislikes. And like to the extent that somebody's trapped by those conditions, / they don't even realize that those conditions are what's driving their behavior, then that is kind of like, flying in the dark, as it were. But you can have kind of like a very strong ego in the sense of goals, desires, objectives, preferences, together with a very high level of flexibility around your view. Be able to like pick it up and let it go. one term that is also common in kind of our circles is the difference between clean fuel versus dirty fuel. So like dirty fuel, for example, for the ego is where you wake up every day and like the reason you do things is like, hey, I want to demonstrate to others what I'm capable of, or like I want to show to others that I'm better than my competitor. Like that is like, yeah, you can drive a lot of motivation from that, but A, in the long term is going to burn you out, and B, it just doesn't feel very good. Or like, well, and C, the way in which you're going to orient yourself and the goals that you're going to choose will generally be less pro-social, right? Like, because you're not doing it out of love.
I think that the work will be worse too. Like Sharon and I always talk about this in context of art, right? Because I mean, we make stuff for the algorithm and the audience. And so there's always this thing of like, well, what are you going out into the world and making, and why are you making it? And you see people that have figured out how to game the algorithm or how to get attention to create this self-reinforcing loop that sends them to, you know, some viral place. And you look at it and you're like, that, yes, that is in some bin successful.
Yeah.
But is it good art? Has it made the world better? Like, do they sleep well at night? Are any of these other things that are part of existence actually present?
Yeah.
And it seems like oftentimes they're not. Like, the most popular YouTube channel in the world is what, Mr. Beast?
Yeah.
Just like, that's the perfect
And at the same time, like as an artist, you can't help but want people to benefit from what you're making. Like you can't be an artist if you don't have an audience, right? It's like in that sense of like connecting with people, like you do want people to enjoy what you're making.
Okay, so then this kind of leads me to this question of like, so for me, enlightenment, there's multiple questions here. One, like, is enlightenment a goal that many people should have? And B, is it compatible with a normal life?
Yeah, a couple things there. So the first one is tapering down on kind of like dirty fuel for your motivation. Usually will produce kind of like a period of just like less overall motivation. And I do see this very often. I mean, but I consider it very beneficial. I mean, like I'm seeing like, let's say like a writer or like an artist, a coder, somebody programming, when they start to meditate and they start to kind of like, let's say like slowly introduce more kind of like, hey, like compassion driven motivation, loving kindness, all of a sudden, like they're just not motivated to do an all-nighter to finish a project, to impress their manager, or like to get like, that extra bonus. And yeah, you know, like that is in some sense incompatible with kind of like a hyper competitive life of, I don't know, like a finance bro or something like that. Because hey, if you're embedded in that system, everybody has like super dirty fuel to begin with, right? You're not going to fit very well with them. That said, that is a period, and eventually the cleaner fuel starts to actually become like a good source of motivation in and of itself.
And what is, in this case, what is the cleaner fuel?
I would say motivation that is selfless, not colored by greed and not colored by hate. Like that would be kind of like the very big picture. Broadly speaking, things such as like wanting to reduce suffering because suffering is bad, not because you want to be a hero. Like that might be like an important distinction.
And is it possible for people to climb those power hierarchies if they are committed to fueling themselves on the clean variety alone? Because I think of like politicians and I'm like, why are all the politicians suck so much? And it's like, well, it's because they have to consume, and the way I see it is they have to consume this dirty fuel in order to even get to the top of that ladder.
Yeah.
And so is it even possible for someone to clean fuel their way into these very powerful, even as an artist, like, I mean, powerful, like having big reach and being able to move mountains and do huge projects, like Mr. Beast type projects. Like, you say what you want about Mr. Beast, but he's able to raise millions of dollars to make these preposterous productions.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not raising millions of dollars to make these monster projects.
And he's doing cool stuff. Like he was doing the thing where he was like giving people surgery for blindness. He was
Right.
building wells in Africa. So like clearly he's like also found a way to leverage it into something that's cleaner.
Yeah,
Presumably.
maybe I answered my own question. But it's weird with politicians because it seems like almost everybody who climbs to the top of that ladder got their own dirty fuel.
Yeah. Well, and you're appealing to the dirty fuel of everybody else, right?
Mm.
Like if you're very popular as a politician and some segments of the population, like you're gonna have to connect with like their desires and drives, right? And usually they're not gonna be very clean.
And maybe that's like a more common denominator somehow.
Yeah.
I have a sneaking suspicion that there's great comfort in the dirty fuels.
Mhm.
And I think that it's very hard. I think that it's very hard to talk about better ways of living without there being this kind of moralistic aspect to it.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
people really react poorly to that because they're like, do you think you're better than me? And it's not really about that. It's more like you could live a better life.
It's like charting an aspirational map, right? Because
like-
it's not like we're executing on it 100% or anything. It's just interesting to imagine what the best way to go is.
I'm like, I think that this is kind of at the core of Jordan Peterson's ideas, which I think is actually really useful. You can like take away all of the weird layers of stuff, and his whole point is he's like, find something good and aim for it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I think is that like the first level of enlightenment, to find something good to aim for?
Mm. I think it depends on the tradition for sure. I mean, because like something like the Theravada kind of imperative is like no, seek your own enlightenment yourself, which is like disconnect from this world and like don't be reborn ever again, and like that's their conception. Whereas in the Mahayana is like hey, like actually like the best thing that you can do is dedicate your life for the enlightenment of all sentient beings. In Theravada, actually, they might say like, yes, that sounds good, but reincarnation is real and it's very noisy, and you don't know where you're going to be reincarnated. So like, if you have a chance of becoming enlightened yourself this lifetime, like just do it. Like forget about everybody else, because like that already is preventing suffering across like a huge number of like future reincarnations. So like just focus on yourself and forget about everybody else.
Because like that entire vector basically just
Time
is taken
integrated.
out.
Yeah. The integral. Yeah, the area under the curve of suffering is minimized when you individually become enlightened, rather than trying to help others, because that is like a very noisy process with a lot of like unlikely possibilities.
Well, isn't it infectious too in some sense?
I mean, I think so. Yeah. I mean, and personally, I actually would agree much more with kind of the Mahayana perspective, where like, hey, if there is no self, actually, it doesn't matter if it's me who becomes awakened or somebody else. And also, I think like there is like enormous value in kind of like creating the body of knowledge and cultivating, like something like the desire for the awakening of everybody. I mean, I think like that's really, really beneficial. But I do see the point that like, hey, it really does kind of depend on the parameters of metaphysics, right? Like maybe it is the case that like from one reincarnation to the next, it's so noisy that like the good karma that you accumulated by trying to help others just doesn't translate into any probability of you becoming enlightened afterwards. So there's kind of some variables for which we would actually need, real information about how the universe works and how reincarnation works, which presumably we don't have that information.
Okay, so then what's the overlap between psychedelics and the Qualia project and enlightenment and meditation?
There's a couple things. So first of all, very, very pragmatically, like one of the big objectives of Qualia research is to minimize suffering throughout the living world. That's since the beginning that it's something that we established as a goal. Which is like, hey, looking for opportunities where like a small intervention would have like a massive benefit for sentient beings. So we think that, like if something like enlightenment can be accelerated, that would be like a massive intervention. I mean, and I don't even mean it from a moral perspective, although it does have like moral implications, but just from a moment to moment felt sense component. I mean, like the subjective quality that, let's say, like Roger Thiesel, or Winston Bryan Scott, or Daniel Ingram, or Frank Yang, which maybe you know about. Like, oh, okay, Frank Yang is just kind of this awakened dude from Singapore who is also like a power lifter, and lots of interesting videos on YouTube. He's quite a fun guy.
Enlightened powerlifting.
Yeah.
That's badass.
He's a very, very funny, very peculiar guy, but like essentially he spent years trying to be like world class in powerlifting. He might have even broken a record for like how high he can jump. Like he has like some of this incredible like athletic capacity. And then something like 8 years ago, he decided like, okay, I'm gonna use all of that focus and energy to become awakened. And then like he actually did it. And like over the course of 5 years or something like that, he was meditating an average of like 4 hours a day, plus going to a bunch of retreats and like really taking it super seriously. And he did it. He actually he has like recorded online like the moment that like the final transition actually happened, and you can see him talk and say like, yeah, this is like even better than MDMA or like better than 5-MeO DMT. Like he's just in a different place. So like true awakening, as it were, this like centerless, no self state of consciousness is not a subtle thing. It really is a radical transformation to consciousness, where like moment to moment is like better than candy flipping. Like it really is like a much, much, much better way of being. So just from
it's permanent too.
Yes. I mean, like they might say something like, well, if they shoot you in the head and you survive, like maybe you might lose the awakening, but like without like some really serious kind of change, it tends to be permanent. One reason I suspect it is permanent is because it seems to be very connected with kind of like achieving a new kind of like energy minima, right? It's kind of like you're jumping to a much more stable configuration. From the point of view of somebody who's awakened, the moment to moment of everybody else is kind of this like, fleeting, finicky, unstable, kind of like unruly, neurotic kind of like state, whereas they're like in this like perfectly like settled and like completely kind of like present without getting distracted, and it's a much better way
like
of
fixing
being.
your posture. Like you just find it to be more comfortable at that point.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
like just more stable, balanced, and you just would never go back to.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they also report like things such as like more symmetry between left and right. Like it's very common for somebody who achieves awakening to become like ambidextrous, for example. I don't. Yeah,
That might even be crazier than the dizziness. That's what.
Well, there's something actually really comforting about working on ambidextrosity. I don't. God, I can't talk.
Ambidextrosity.
Oh, ambidextrosity. Yes.
Yeah, like I in the summer at least I do like some archery, and it hurts if you're only like I've noticed shooting arrow after arrow after arrow, day in day out, that the right side of my body gets really messed up. So I start shooting with the left, and you're really terrible when you start on the left because if you're right-handed, But then the more that you do it, like I find it to actually be kind of like retune my brain a little bit in this really pleasant, like comforting sort of way.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll write with my left hand too, but it's like very.
I tried that in high school for like a year one time.
Well, I mean, it's weird how locked in we are to one side of the body because we know that the brain is wired across the body, and so it seems like you've got this captive in there that like doesn't actually have access to the rest of the world in these expressive ways of art and of writing and of all these other things. So that is really interesting.
This connects very much with my intuitive model as well of awakening. So I would, and I've talked this with some of these people, and they tend to agree. Well, I mean, first of all, I guess another piece of context, which is that people who are really advanced, again, like awakened individuals, if you ask them how is your day-to-day experience related to like substances, they will say like, well, there's like a little bit of something like LSD like, maybe psilocybin like, but is very different. Like there's like maybe a hint of it, like some shared components, but there's a lot of like 5-MeO DMT qualia. And so Shenzhen Yang, for example, described 5-MeO DMT as directionally right. Is not exactly awakening, but maybe is like off by a few degrees. And again, I mean, I've had the honor the luck of being able to explore 5-MeO DMT very deeply in Canada and in Mexico in legal settings. And I mean, yeah, when it goes really well and I go very deep, like I think I really get like an intuitive understanding, like, oh, okay, so this is what these guys are talking about. And when I describe it, like they say, like, yeah, it's more along those lines, and it has to do with kind of like a very, very deep evenness of the attention in your entire kind of like sensory stream. So it's almost kind of like normally when you look at your visual field, even independently of like how you're like moving your eyes, is like, well, you're selecting what to pay attention to. And it's kind of like you're putting a spotlight of attention here, and everything else becomes kind of like clamped or becomes kind of like dimmed out. Whereas in both the 5-MeO DMT state and the fully awakened state, it's more like you can see your entire visual field at once, like all at once.
It would be really interesting. Do you know that the gorilla bouncing the basketball?
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to show that to people
Yes.
that are on DMT who haven't seen it before, to
Yes.
see if they're actually, if it changes the ratio of those who notice it and those who don't.
That should be an easy test. Yeah, no, I can add it to our psychophysics. I should do that. Yeah, another thing that changes physiologically, or like it's been measured. I don't know how many what is the N of these like studies, but like consistently becoming awakened does seem to like significantly improve your reaction time. Like your ability, like, hey, like your cup falls off your table and you're able to grab it, like that sort of thing. Like they just like way faster. And you know, like those like simple tests of like, hey, like we're gonna shine a light, and like as soon as you see it, press a button. Like they're really fast at that. Like it suggesting that they're kind of like skipping some kind of like intermediate, like egoic aspect of the processing of information. Like they're not concerned about how is this information related to me anymore. They just kind of like skip that step. And it's like, oh yeah, well, it's how is my sensory input related to my other sensory input? There's no like me in between. That is kind
Does
of
the DMT reaction improve reaction times as well?
I don't think so. No. And it would be like 5-MeO DMT is the one that is related to awakening. DMT is more related to like fire casina, like the visionary kind of spirit molecule type effect. Yeah. I mean, very, very broadly too. Like, I guess, like from here, like 5-MeO DMT. I mean, at least among the people that participated in our research.
This version of what you're showing us has more sliders.
Yes.
Is it different?
It's slightly different, yes.
Okay.
So this one has like two sides, and I can control them independently. So let's put like the left one in kind of like a 5-MeO DMT state, which is like on 5-MeO, like kind of like the vibrations tend to slowly cohere. And that I think is what causes the feeling of oneness. Like just like everything synchronizes, your visual field, your tactile field, auditory field. And it feels like there's just one thing. It's like you don't have a lot of buckets for memory. You just have kind of like one big bucket that contains this very complex thing that you're seeing all at once. Whereas in the normal state, it's almost kind of like we're fragmented into something like 7 different attention streams. I mean, a metaphor I sometimes use is like we're kind of like a bee colony. And maybe there's kind of like 7 bees, and like when you're talking to somebody, it's like 3 of those bees are kind of like on that person. It's like they're paying attention, but you're also like scouting, you know, what's going around. Do I need to go to the restroom? Am I thirsty? Whereas on 5-MeO DMT or very deep jhana meditation, what happens is those 7 bees, they all sit in the same place. And then like it looks like just one bee. Like you don't even notice that there's like multiples of them.
That must be such a pleasant experience.
Yes, it really is.
To just be able to tap out of the constant.
I feel like you get really close with some other, we would call them like flow state activities. Like for me, like rock climbing, playing, especially the saxophone because it's breath oriented, but playing music, like I have no real experience of time having passed with these activities often as well. And I feel like my attention is like 100% focused on the activity.
Yeah, it's interesting because for music, the activity is fully focused on time, right? Because rhythm and meter and interval is like key to it. And yet, as part of the process, it completely disappears. Like you're suspended somewhere else by virtue of paying attention to this grid, which is
like we play a lot of music while we're cooking. So, but it's funny because we'll have timers going. Like we'll put something in the oven to cook, and then we'll be like, okay, we can play some songs, and then the timer will go off, and I'll just can't believe that so much time has passed, or any time has passed at all. It's so very bizarre. Every time it happens, the timer goes, whoa, oh, it's been 10 minutes or 20 minutes.
So I wonder, like, right, if you spent 8 hours a day playing music, something repetitive, something that you're not, trying to focus on this extraordinarily difficult performance where you're reading music and you're trying to integrate something, you're trying to learn something. But instead or drum circles, right? I think that's maybe the most fundamental, where it's like if you spent 8 hours a day playing drums for a week, that seems like that would be a similarly meditative experience to just sitting.
Yeah, probably. I mean, one of the very, very popular meditation techniques is transcendental meditation, which essentially boils down to like repeating a very simple mantra and concentrating your attention in your crown chakra. I mean, there's like some variants, but like it's very simple, repetitive motion, which it's kind of hints at something like like
rock and roll.
Yeah.
For real though, yeah. It did strike me that like if you play songs, like you play them hundreds of times, and they do at some point start to feel like a mantra. Like you're beyond the learning part, you're beyond the technical part. It's just this like experience that's very, in some sense, predictable and steady.
Yeah, like we just finished a record and we've been playing these songs for, I don't know, like 2 years almost at this point.
Well, intensely for a year, yeah.
Yeah, and so like we're planning on touring on them at the end of the summer, and they're at many of them, the ones that are on the record, are at this point exactly where you're not thinking, and it's such a glorious moment because it's so different from what it feels like when you're still figuring it out and you're trying to get to this place, and you're like, well, what if I do this thing here instead of that thing? And now you're like, no, I know how this goes. And I think it's a very meditative experience, but I don't hear it as being part of like a meditation practice that often, which I find, I just think that it's not within the schools of traditional meditative teachings. But I imagine that there's a whole wealth of these things. Like maybe somebody who codes has that experience too when they're working on things that they have just like a deep familiarity with.
Yeah.
It feels like they're not working on something, they're literally just channeling some organization of nature into place.
Yeah. I'm sure like it's moving in that gradient for sure. The thing I'm not sure if it would you can get there with music that is complex at the very least is like the complete unification. Like for that I think you probably do require some kind of actually like special sensory input and mindset, because even if you're like really focused, let's say coding, you're still kind of like have several working memory slots. It's like you're thinking, okay, how does this array relate to this pointer, which is related to this like other, like value into cache or whatever, and you're making these like arrows in your mind of how information is related, and that segments your attention already. Whereas like very very deep jhana meditation or like permanent awakening is almost kind of like there's just only one memory slot, and like this is it. I guess like circling back to like, is this compatible with everyday life / living in society? I will mention that everybody that I know who has gone through these transitions said that for a period of in between weeks and months after their big awakening, they were dysfunctional, and almost to the point of like needing others to take care of them. That said, this is like very well known in monasteries. Like in a Zen monastery, they will know like, hey, you achieved like the big transformation. Like they might bring food to you every day. They make life easy for you to like adapt to this other configuration. But eventually, what they argue is that, well, you subconsciously learn to navigate life automatically without like a sense of self, without a doer. But it's almost kind of like you're a baby again. But eventually you do adapt, and actually you're like hyper functional. I mean, like at least the people that I know who've done these transitions, they're not just as functional as before. They're more productive. I guess they do more things as far as I can tell than before. And
I mean, that intuitively that makes sense, right? Because if you have the 7 bees,
Yeah.
and the bees are always doing different things, it's very noisy and chaotic.
Yeah.
But if you get to the place where everything is streamlined and focused on whatever is happening right in this moment, you're not like checking your phone, you're not getting distracted, you're not in some other space while also trying to do something. So that does seem like it would lead to that.
Yeah. There's one twist to this, so maybe I should add for clarification, which is that, I mean, the state of kind of like being fully concentrated, I mean, it is both a meditation state and also like a feature of like permanent awakening. But in some sense, it's not exactly just the complete opposite to our normal state. So like I think like there's one axis, which is like, okay, how many bees do you have? And generally speaking, like fewer, like more concentrated, tends to be closer to awakening, tends to be closer to like feelings of well-being and bliss and rapture and so on. But there's like maybe another axis, which is how much are the bees fighting with each other? And that is the one that completely goes away when you're awakened. Like, I mean, essentially they might say something like, yeah, like the bees inside them, like their attention streams, they disagree, but they're not like, there's no internal struggle associated with it. Like they can actually be okay in a state of incoherence without like fighting it. In fact, like Roger Teasdale, one of these people, like the way he actually describes it is like something like realizing that you're a hive mind and being okay with it. Whereas the normal everyday mode of experiencing life is actually more kind of like a mob mentality where like 60% of the bees or the subagents are trying to gain control of the entire organism, and they're suppressing the other like 20 to 40%. I mean, it's sort of like, hey, I don't want to go to work, I don't want to finish this report, but I have to. There's almost kind of like some internal micro bullying that is happening where like, well, 60% of you like forces the other 40% to do something it doesn't want to. And it's this fragmentation that I think is the thing that truly goes away. And it is for sure what I personally have experienced a lot with 5-MeO DMT, that like as soon as like a significant dose hits, I realize like, oh wow, yeah, I'm a kind of like hive mind, but I'm okay with that. Like I may have like conflicting desires, there's a lot going on, but there isn't this kind of like compulsion to try to like coerce the parts that are different or like disagree to kind of like follow the main narrative, as it were.
Okay, well, so
Yes.
interestingly enough, if the attention fields on 5-MeO DMT
Yes.
is the way that you show it, which is this kind of slow-moving, coherent undulation, does that suggest that it kind of, with the absence of that grasping, that it seems to regulate itself into something that is unified?
Yeah, it tends to, yes.
So it's like you notice the hive mind, but the hive mind is no longer, it kind of naturally coalesces into something that's functional together as opposed to being chaotic.
Yeah.
Okay, can you take it with you?
What do you mean?
Like,
Oh,
so you
Can you
have
bring
this
it back from
experience.
the trip?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my current sense is that 5-MeO DMT used in the right way can accelerate the process of awakening. And yeah, I mean, I on the one hand, I'm like very candid about like the fact that I think 5-MeO DMT has changed me in a overall good way, but I am not awakened. Like I would not classify myself in that level of stage, but I would say that probably I'm like much further along in that path than I would be without 5-MeO.
Mhm.
I mean, then again, I've done a lot of 5-MeO, and like I don't know if there's like a practical or like I don't know reasonable, sensible way for most people to approach it. I've had like hundreds of experiences, all of them in like very good circumstances, and thankfully, I tend to react really well to 5-MeO for whatever reason. And I do suspect that, yeah, like, but it's not something kind of like instant awakening. It might be something more along the lines of, rather than taking 20 years, it might take you like 3.
Mm.
Like if you're taking 5-MeO DMT every once a week, but you also have like, this rigorous meditation practice and you have like people to support you, I'm thinking, yeah, maybe accelerating by a factor of like 7 or a factor of 8 or something like that. That is what I see realistic.
Interesting.
And it does, I mean, like most people who have like a very powerful 5-MeO experience, they will say like it changed them. Like something clicks, there's something, they see the world a little bit differently. For the most part, especially with people who've used it only a few times, the main takeaway, like the main reframe, is that they have like an intuitive sense of how it's all one. Like that is the main kind of like early message that 5-MeO DMT gives you, so to speak. Is like just like this like intuitive feeling of like how yes, it's actually possible that we're all God. Like it's not just metaphorical, but it's like no, there is maybe some literal truth to this. But I will say that that's like a kind of like an early insight. And if you keep exploring 5-MeO, there's like, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but there's kind of like levels of awakening. There's like levels and depths, and eventually you even realize that like even that sense of oneness was a little bit kind of like sneaky and kind of like jumping to conclusions. So there's like something deeper, which is more kind of emptiness, which is interdependence. And like at the end of the day, I think it's impossible to tell if we're all one or not. But I think it's very possible to tell that we're interdependent. And like that is like a thing that it ends up being as kind of like this like very strong fact that you become convinced of essentially.
I think you can
yeah.
reason your way to that position as well. Like not even experientially. Like the fact that there's just a bunch of atoms that got together in this room right now is like completely bananas.
Yes.
So
I had a crazy experience the other day when we were going to that choir concert, and we were sitting in the car watching as people filed into the concert hall. And I was just struck by how astounding it was that there was, the difference between the rock that's in the planter versus the person who's ambulating and making their way into the concert hall for this experience is just insane. Like, what are we doing? These like collective atoms.
Yeah, we're all made out of atoms, or what, at least you could conceive of it that way.
Yeah.
Like there's just there's something. It's hard not to see it as indicative of some interconnection between all of these pieces. Yeah. It's hard to not see it. Just even from a first principles perspective.
Yeah.
It I think the rabbit hole goes very deep in that one. Yes. I'll mention also like the feeling of a here and a there also collapses in 5-MeO DMT. It actually, you get this impression that like you representing the world as like I'm here and you're there is actually kind of like using an optical illusion. And it's almost kind of like when you notice that something is an optical illusion finally, and you notice like, oh, actually, yeah, there's no depth in here. That's like just something that kind of, it looks like there's depth. The magic eye effect, right? It's like, imagine you've like all your life, you've been staring at this piece of paper and you saw like the sense of depth. And then one day you realize, wait, hold on, this is actually a flat picture. Like I was just like crossing my eyes in a strange kind of way. The feeling of like self and other, or division between present and past, here and there, is like that. And on 5-MeO DMT at a high dose, like that's one of the things that collapses. You realize like, oh, I was just kind of like tensing my visual field in this like strange way that caused the feeling of separation, but actually that was just a visual illusion.
That's really interesting. There's a guy who does visual illusions that I really like. I think it's like Koichi Sugihara. And he's this like award-winning illusionist, and he has this one that I really love. That's the impossible garage roof. And so I'll add the video of this, but the video of it is that there's a little VW bus over an arched roof, or there's an arched roof over it, but there's a mirror in front of it, and in the mirror the roof is a zigzag. And then he wrote this arm reaches in and rotates the field, and you can see that the roof is just constructed in a crazy way where you can see the angle of it. It's actually, the planes meet in this weird way, and then he rotates it 180 degrees, and again you see the fact that it's zigzag, and now in the mirror it's the perfect arc. And so I love that, because you can
it's really incredible.
You can stare at the roof and it always will look curved, and in the mirror it will always be zigzag, and then only when it just shifts in this little way you're like, oh my god, it's not real.
Yes. Yes, that's a great metaphor.
I love those things.
I mean, essentially, yes, like the feeling that we're a separate self, the feeling that there's a past and a future, and that there's a here and a there, is just what reality looks like when you see it from a very specific, weird angle. And then you shift the angle, is like, okay, yeah, it looks differently. And that was just a illusion from that perspective, and that's it.
Okay, so we have that there's these modes in the mind, that there's some sort of coherent behavior of neurons that produce these brainwaves that change with psychedelics that affect the way that we perceive things.
Yeah.
That meditation feeds into this also from a different direction, and so you can have a similar end result by approaching it from completely different directions.
Yeah.
But you also explore other stuff, right? Like you explore sounds, you explore smells.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we can talk about the way that all of these things fold into the project.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, vision is just kind of like a place where we have like a lot of low-hanging fruit, and the results are like very, quantitative. It's easy to kind of like make rigorous, as it were. And yeah, sometimes I get messages or emails or like YouTube comments or something is like oh, you're so narrow focused. You should be studying like other senses too. But it's like, no, actually, that we also do that. It's just maybe it doesn't become viral and it's not like as visible. But to give you an example, like in 2021, we spent a bunch of time like working on the tentative name was called the Annealotron, which is like how to produce neural annealing without substances.
And neural annealing is just this unified behavior of neurons in the brain?
Let me explain a little bit. Yeah, neural annealing is a theory, a conceptual framework to try to explain how psychedelics and meditation affects you. Developed by me and Mike Johnson, co-founder of QRI. The overall idea is that you can kind of like explain a lot of like phenomenology and psychological alternations in terms of injections of energy and then like cooling down processes. That it's just like this. It's a beautiful metaphor because I mean, if you think of like a worn out metal, like industrial metal, for example, right? Like after a while, it becomes brittle. The reason is that it accumulates all of these like imperfections, literally things such as like dislocations in the like atomic matrix. Like you get kind of like misalignments and like defects effectively. And when you accumulate a lot of those, the metal becomes like unusable. It just like falls apart. It like bends easily. It breaks. Now you may imagine like, okay, how can you possibly bring back a metal like that to kind of like a youthful state? Is like, what are you going to do? Are you going to literally go into the microscopic level and rearrange the atoms? Like that's impossible, right? Like and plus the second law of thermodynamics, things become more disordered over time, right? However, you can actually heat up the metal and then like take it above what's called the recrystallization temperature.
Melt it.
Yeah. You don't quite melt it because melting it would just completely destroy all the shape even. But there's kind of like this like threshold where like it decrystallizes, but it doesn't change its macroscopic shape quite yet. And then if you let it cool slowly, the atomic lattice literally reorganizes into a more symmetrical, perfect configuration. And so you kind of like revive the youthful properties, which is like strength and ductility in the metal. And it sounds paradoxical, right? It's like you're making it more ordered by carefully administering disorder. And that's what we think is the first approximation happening with psychedelics. I mean, Robin Carhart-Harris coined the term entropic disintegration. That like psychedelics in his entropic brain hypothesis, they really kind of like scramble the patterns of like who is connected with what for a little while. But then the thing that we kind of like added into the picture is like, well, yes, but in the cooling process, you have like an opportunity of kind of like rearranging it in a way that is like more harmonious. There's like other elements to the theory. I mean, it is kind of like a fleshed out conceptual framework that involves things such as, okay, there's like energy sources, there's energy sinks, and also there is what are called the connectum specific harmonic waves, which is like the body wide or the brain wide resonances, resonant modes, and those also play a role. I mean, like part of the idea is that the kind of like hedonically compromised state that most of people are in is such that they have kind of like internal representations that maybe are good at tracking external information, but they're not very resonant with their own kind of like overall kind of like resonant modes of their own body and brain. So in part, what you're doing with meditation and psychedelics is you're preventing the energy, the overall excitation from just being captured by kind of these internal models. and internal representations. And instead you let them kind of like spread out throughout your entire body into what we called semantically neutral energy. It's kind of like energy, but without like an interpretation, without a meaning to it. And the good thing about that is that, hey, when you actually have kind of, you're energizing your resonant modes, not the resonant modes of your representations, but the resonant modes of your entire system, that actually feels really good. That is almost kind of the signature of euphoria, which is when you're just kind of like energizing what, your natural biological biorhythms, as it were, as opposed to the distorted versions of the biorhythms that you're using to represent things. And so it's better to, how to put it, like it's better to build representations on top of a stack of resonances that are like very compatible with happiness, as opposed to try to create the vibrations that feel good out of your internal representations, because that is very clunky and very limited. So yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, neural annealing as a theory is kind of an explanation of like how like over time psychedelics and meditation shift more of your energy to kind of your natural harmonic resonant modes, as opposed to the like clunky kind of internal representations that don't quite do it very well.
Okay, and so that makes a lot of sense for something like psychedelics. It makes a lot of sense for something like meditation, and I guess sounds too, like your case.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about music when you were describing the heating, and like one of my favorite devices in music or favorite experiences is when this kind of fervor and chaos builds up and it feels like the band's going to shake itself apart, but then all of a sudden it just locks into this like very like steady like either pulse or this very steady tone, this harmonic like just kind of tower of just almost solid sound. Like
something coherent. It becomes coherent. It goes from disorder and chaos. You could do this with loudness too. When things get really, really loud and then all of a sudden they go quiet. It's kind of a similar experience.
Yeah, I almost feel like the experience of, for me, enjoying music like that I really love, or making music that I love, is a series of those events just continually, of just that chaos being like sort of ordered, and then it morphs into more chaos that orders, and you have this like repeated experience of integrating all of those pieces.
Is that like the model of tension and release?
It's like tension release, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things here. One is, I mean, whenever you can interpret something, when you interpret sensory input as something you have seen before, that functions as an energy sink. Essentially, it kind of like captures that energy and then it's not available anymore. So like if you hear like a strange sound and you can't interpret it, it's like, oh, what is that? What is that? It kind of like bounces off. When you realize like, oh, it's a cat. It's like, okay, you're taking that sound, you put it in a box. It's a cat. The cat is in some sense like functioning as an energy sink. And you become like less curious, right? Like you kind of like lower how unstable your experience is because you have like settled it. One of the things that effectively you can do in music and in art to kind of like induce a neural annealing process is precisely playing with sensory input and stimuli that your brain doesn't know how to categorize, because then it kind of like keeps thinking about it and it builds up. And so like very novel music, very strange sounds, like different scales, I guess, like things that just don't fit a pre-existing category in general are going to be more effective at energizing you and taking you to kind of like these like maybe trance states or hyper energized states that can induce a neural annealing process. Another hack is surprise. So like surprise in general, some people think of surprise as kind of like negative, but the way we've always thought about it at QRI is actually just kind of like an energy multiplier. So when something is surprising, you're going to experience that sensor input in a more salient way. It's just kind of like increasing the brightness of that sensor input. Now, something can be surprising in an unpleasant way or in a pleasant way, right? But the point is that surprise modulates energy.
Like comedies, that's exactly what comedy is, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is something funny? Because it's surprising in a unique way that you haven't seen before.
Yes, and usually comedy also has like a sense of safety. I mean, it's like the thing is surprising, but in a way that creates the feeling of the relief from like a threat of danger, or like, oh, it could have been worse. It depends. There's like some very dark comedy that they play with the opposite, but
I mean, I think that there's sometimes also the element of surprise that you're hearing somebody say something out loud that you like haven't been able to vocalize or know is true, but recognize that it's not. Nobody's allowed to say it. Like I think that Louis C.K.'s comedy is often like that, where he reflects this like deep horror of existence, where you're kind of horrified to listen to him, but at the same time, it is very funny.
But it's like something that everybody has actually thought of.
Yeah, and it's just I remember when I was working at UCSF, I was talking about Louis C.K. to the guy that I was working with, and he kind of stopped for a minute, and he's like, I don't think you should be listening to Louis C.K. It's just too horrible. And I was like, I know, but that's why it's funny. But so how do the smells tie into this? Because we've talked about the Neelotron before a little bit, but I've just been tangentially aware, and we're in a room where there's perfumes on almost every single shelf.
Yes, and and you see like those styrofoam, they're full of perfumes and essential oils and aroma chemicals, and I mean, like,
do you make these?
Yeah. In fact, I can show you some perfumes that I created. These are kind of like second generation in that like it's actually like a QRI volunteer who is like actually making them now. But I came up with the formula. Why not? Let me.
Yeah, we could. That'd be cool to close on. I'm making that. You done with it?
Yeah, that's so. We'll try it out.
Oh.
It's interesting because like one of the we talked to one other person who makes perfumes.
Oh, okay.
And he's also very interested in resonant theories of consciousness.
Yes.
It is Luca Turin.
Oh, yeah. I love Luca Turin, yeah. He went to the Canada retreat, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Although he only tried, I mean, again, like, he only tried, like, very, very small dose of 5-MeO. He did not end up, like, contributing an essay to the project, but he was such a, like, value add to the whole event because I don't know.
He's a character.
Yeah. And I actually recorded his reactions to my perfumes. I'm gonna put them online pretty soon.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, like a broad introduction was something like, well, I describe a lot things such as like the phenomenology of 5-MeO DMT or like advanced meditation states, but a lot of people have like no reason to believe me in a sense. It's kind of like, well, if they have never experienced, they don't plan on experiencing it, how do we know that like my descriptions are actually like hitting on something real? Whereas like smell, like 98% of people can smell. I mean, unfortunately, there's like 2% of people who are like anosmic or have like serious like scent deficits, but it's something like much like a much bigger pie of the region of the pie of the population can actually relate to. And one of the goals of QRI from the beginning has been to like map out the state space of consciousness. Smell is not that important in the grand scheme of things, simply because the bulk of the hedonic tone in humans has actually more to do with like tactile sensations, like whether it's like physical pain or like emotional discomfort. Those tend to be kind of like embodied, like tactile like feelings. Smell, it really has to be really extreme for it to actually be something that like harms your quality of life in a very, very meaningful way. But
I feel like it does improve the quality of life.
Yes,
there's something about, I think that one of the main benefits of spring is that everything begins to smell again, and you walk around and everything's kind of wafting in this very beautiful way.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I suppose like we one of the big ideas in the Qualia Research Institute is what we call the logarithmic scales of pleasure and pain, which is like that both the extremes of pleasure and the extremes of pain are like much more intense than people like can possibly imagine, right? So like a 5-MeO DMT, a good 5-MeO DMT experience, a 10 out of 10 experience is like, hundreds of times like more pleasurable than like just a normal orgasm, so to speak. And the same for like pain, and like cluster headaches are like orders of magnitude worse than people can possibly imagine. And scent just don't take you to those levels. Or like maybe scent can take you from like -4 out of 10 to +4 out of 10.
Have you ever done smelling salts?
Yes, that's right. Those are really intense. Yes. But even there, like I think like it might be like -6, maybe. Like it just doesn't get to the level of like actual physical pain. I think.
I've never done it.
I have some if you want to try them.
Let's do it.
Nice.
But aren't there like gradations? Like some of them, like when they're fresh and you first open them.
There's gonna be. I haven't used this batch actually. So.
Yeah, I'm down.
For me, they're pretty unpleasant.
We can end on the bad note.
Let's get some, yeah.
But okay, let me show you this one actually. So this one is called Fearless, and it's a completely made from scratch. So like, there's some essential oils, but it's actually mostly aroma chemicals. One cool thing maybe to mention for people who are interested in this topic is that it's actually very difficult to like create a novel perfume just using essential oils, because essential oils are like very dirty. Like every essential oil has like 20 different molecules. You start mixing two essential oils is like, yeah, okay, this is like, I don't know, vanilla and like rose or something, like the distinct character continues. But if you mix 10 essential oils, it all kind of starts to converge to this like olfactory brown. It's like, well, it's herbal, it's like flowery, it's woody, but like there's nothing distinct about it. So if you want to actually create like a new identity, something that the world has never seen before, so to speak, it has never smelled before, you require aroma chemicals. You essentially need like pure molecules, know how they work, how they combine. Even if you want something like, hey, I want something that smells like, strawberry and grape and like ashes or something. It's still better if you use like pure aroma chemicals and know how to balance it, because if you actually use the essential oils from those different scents, they become murky. So I guess like this is just kind of like for some context.
I've noticed that, because at some point I was buying essential oils and I was mixing them, and I was always surprised by how it kind of it feels thick and kind of heavy, and the, like you're saying, the individual scents disappearing. So you can have broad directions. I found that if you mixed a bunch of citrus ones together and then added something that was oppositional to that, like something flowery or sweet, you could maintain the tones.
Yes.
But you would have to mix like broad categories that played well together.
Yeah.
And then balance them with maybe one other category of smell.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're using like individual molecules.
Yeah. I mean, I can show you. You can probably see around here, but there's like some that is like, literally like a bottle of like linalool, for example. Linalool is like, all lavender is like 30% of the essential oil is linalool, and like that one doesn't smell like lavender, but it smells like something much more like generic and kind of like present in a lot of things. And one of the things that I actually found out via my own exploration is that scent really kind of like combines 3 different qualia varieties, and we just confuse them because they always come together, which is, there's like a flavor component. I mean, there's like kind of like, hey, is this sweet, sour, like bitter type of thing. Then there is kind of like a signal processing modifier, which I equate to, for example, like a reverb filter. Right. So like one thing is like, hey, like the voice of somebody, and then is like how that voice is distorted by the echoes of the room. Right. So in perfumery is the same. You have like, hey, is this like strawberry? But it's like strawberry in an auditorium, or like strawberry like that is kind of like more spiky and like just in your face. Or there's like things that modify. And usually they don't smell very much themselves. So linalool in lavender is like that. It doesn't have much of a clear character of its own, but it will modify anything you mix it with in a predictable and interesting way.
That's really interesting.
And then the third component is tactile. Like most people don't realize this, but like a very big chunk of like the sensation of smell is actually almost kind of like tactile hallucinations. In particular, and I'll show you in a second, one of these examples is when you smell something like menthol, it actually feels cool. It's not a synesthetic kind of like vague thing. It's actually like tactile feelings of feeling more cold. And the way mechanistically this works is that these molecules are like essentially modifying the threshold at which like temperature sensing receptors get activated.
Wait, that's actually their mechanism of action?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So the neurons believe that they're in a cold environment and they signal, hey, we're cold. But it's actually kind of like an illusion caused by the exogenous molecule. So it is tactile. So I don't know, like mint, for example, it is like, hey, it has a flavor, it has a modifier, and it has a tactile element. And you can really understand a smell only when you kind of like decompose it and see how those interact with each other.
That's really interesting. Are there like books for putting these smells together, or it's just trial and error?
I mean, it is essentially alchemy. I mean, and maybe that is kind of the value proposition of QRI is like I'm trying to develop the chemistry equivalent of scent, which is like what are the qualia varieties and the actual building blocks and what is the mathematics for how they combine. And it ultimately touches very strongly on like the music theory of consciousness, that like whether it's like scent, tactile sensations, audio, visual, there's always a sense of like there's like some harmonious configurations and some dissonant configurations. And it's never as simple as, hey, put two pleasant things together and the result will be pleasant, right? Because you can play two songs at the same time. You may love both of the songs, but when they overlap, it clashes very badly, right? So like pleasure and pain is never as simple as like, hey, add more sugar or like reduce sugar. It's more like, how will the notes actually interact with each other? You actually need to like work through how all of the interactions and how you get a gestalt out of that. So the first one I'm going to show you, it's Fearless. This actually, the idea came to me, and also a bunch of smell hallucinations in a meditation retreat where I was experiencing a lot of fear. Also, important to note, fear is very common in meditation retreats, and like it's something you should anticipate may happen. You know, if you go deep in meditation, it's like, yeah, sometimes you may experience fear for no apparent reason. And in that meditation retreat, there were like several days I was experiencing quite a bit of fear. I didn't know why, but my subconscious was kind of like saying like, okay, how about we deal with the fear with some smells? And like, it was giving me suggestions for things to smell or like imagining smells. And so like, and I realized like, hey, oh my gosh, these scents, they actually kind of like cancel out the vibrations of fear. Like if you think of fear as a type of vibratory dynamic, there are like some scents that vibrate in a different way that kind of like cancel out the fear. That's or like fun. At least reduce it. And so, several notes came to mind. I tried to put it together. It didn't quite work. A year later, with more knowledge, I was able to put it together. And so this is kind of the result of like the idea and what I call the olfactory idea. And yeah, let's see what you guys think. And feel free to guess like what are the components or the various notes in it.
Excellent. No, like geranium.
I was going to say grape popsicles.
That's not a bad guess.
I love grape popsicles. So.
It's not a bad guess.
I mean, it's very nice. It's floral, very smooth, a little bit cold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like some orange or some citrus in there?
Very little. It's a tiny bit of citrus. But it's not a very citrusy.
I was going to say something like more musky, like incense. Heavier. I don't possess the vocabulary for smells.
Yeah, this is a first for us. We don't smell
Most
things
of
a lot.
Yeah, except for the compost. It's like, it's time to take the compost out. The litter box.
Yeah, dude. So what's in it?
Yeah. So the first thing that my subconscious said, okay, like maybe this might cancel out fear, was a banana. And I don't know if you've ever smelled a banana and felt afraid. Like it just doesn't.
I think you mentioned it. I don't think I
have. Banana, but then yeah, like the big players here are jasmine, vanilla, and honeydew melon. And that forms kind of like the backbone of the Gestalt. And then there's a little bit of like mint and
I smell the jasmine now that you mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
yes,
As
yeah,
soon
yeah.
as you said that, I was like, oh, that's what that is.
I smell the honeydew melon too. It's kind of got this like wetness to it.
Yeah.
Like it's very juicy.
Yes. And I would argue that juiciness is very, I don't know, it's reassuring. It's kind of like you're in a lush kind of like tropical environment. It's not very compatible with fear sensations.
Yeah, like as long as you've got food to eat and there's like jasmine nearby, you're probably gonna be okay.
Yes.
I love that.
But even more than just kind of like associations, just notice the vibratory quality of it, right? Like it doesn't have like spikes, right? Like it doesn't.
It's just perfectly round, almost like there's no aggressiveness to it whatsoever.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
And it works. Whenever I've experienced fear in meditation, put it on it. It actually has like a very positive effect.
That's cool.
All right, let me show you a couple more just for your immediate impressions. So this one is also. I'm not gonna even say what the name is. Just so it's a novel. But this one like highlights one of the facets of scent that it tends to be neglected, and so like I wonder like how you'll react to it.
Thank you. This one's more colorful.
Whoa.
This one has was it ylang ylang in it?
No, it doesn't.
I was gonna say woody.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sandalwood?
Yeah. Something in the space of sandalwood.
Like piney or something.
I'm discovering I'm terrible at identifying smells. I would not make it as what are the
Yeah, it reminds me of like pine or sap or something like that.
Yeah, sap. Yes.
It kind of smells like the woods in California a little bit.
Yeah, like cedar.
Yes, cedar.
You're good at that.
Yeah, I got a future in there. If I ever get bored with music, get into making perfumes.
Oh, you'd make beautiful perfumes.
So this one is called Dust the Devil. And the core idea, it actually works even better as you let it kind of like it evolves a little bit over a few minutes. But the main idea I was trying to exemplify here was how something can actually be kind of like dusty and dry. And that's kind of like a tactile synesthetic component, and like not something that is obvious. Like people don't imagine like, hey, like there is such a thing as a dusty smell. What are you talking about? And there's nothing dry. I mean, this is a liquid, right? Like there's nothing dry in here, but it causes the feeling of dryness. It's kind of like a olfactory illusion that like, oh, it's very dry.
Well, so that's interesting that you say that, because when I said California woods, my experience in the woods here is it's dry. You walk around and like the branches are breaking underfoot and everything's kind of, it's dusty, and there's a certain shape to that smell.
Especially in the previous 30 years.
Yeah, it's hard
but
to
the
remember.
desert also, like the desert pine, the pinyon, and the chaparral.
I like this one a lot.
Nice, thank you.
It's really beautiful.
So the core ideas here is like cedrine, which is an element of cedar wood. It's actually kind of like the most dry, sappy kind of kind of like parched earth type of quality of it. One that most people, I mean, it's very strong, but most people have no idea this is even a thing. It's called whiskey lactone, which is actually kind of like the woody vanilla component of whiskey. That it's also in tequila, but
like the barrels.
Yeah, very very barrel like. It's also common in wine, but whiskey has it way more than any other spirits. So it has a little bit of kind of like all the Wild West vibe as well.
It does, yeah.
And then like this very beautiful molecule that's called like ambroxan, which is very very common in perfumery, which is like kind of like turns everything a little bit kind of like drier, but in a way that is kind of like pleasant and warm and comforting.
It is a really comforting scent, and all of the descriptions that you've given of it are. I imagine also like kind of an old house.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. A good old house, like a beloved grandparent. What is this one called though again?
Dust Devil.
Dust Devil. All right.
All right. And then the last one. This one, I mean, it's kind of a joke. We're kind of taking it seriously as well, but Uh, we are selling these perfumes. You can actually get them online. Like if you enter to QRI.org, there's a little picture of a dog in the top right. If you click there, it will take you to the perfume page. And you of course, like we're a nonprofit. This is a fundraiser, so obviously it's overpriced. We're trying to fund a research institute to study consciousness and 5-MeO DMT and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I think like the price for the basic set, which includes like the Dust Devil and Fearless, is like reasonable. But if you want the full set, which includes this one, which is the Hedonium Shockwave, that's a $20,000.
Oh my God. Did we get a discount code on that?
Well, you do get like a 50 mil one. You don't get like something as small as these, but meaning that this particular scent that I'm about to share with you, there's only like so much of it in existence and can only be so much in existence because it does have like a few ingredients that like they don't make anymore.
Oh wow.
But yeah, the full bottle would be like $20,000. So this is, and I'm very happy with this
What
one.
a
I actually, yeah. Well, let's see how you react to it. I did spend like 2 months perfecting this and like trying to make it like as pleasant as possible. So
Oh yeah.
let's see what you guys think.
Wow. Okay, this is quite the.
All right.
I love that. So, it's like very comforting. Fruity again of some kinds, like something juicy is in there.
Like watermelon.
Mm.
Yeah, it reminds me of like a really pleasant bathing experience.
Oh, it does kind of smell like the bath, but like a very clean
Like
bath.
cleaning your hair or something. Some conditioner.
Yeah, it's like very bright. Like almost has this kind of like white quality to it, where it's just like kind of a. It doesn't have a cold sensation to it, but it does feel like maybe you're, I don't know, at the ocean. And there's like a breeze that's the perfect temperature and it's not too harsh. And it's just like very fresh. Clean laundry in there too.
I have no idea what this one's made out of though, really.
No, none. I mean, again, like I smell things, but I have utter blindness to their mappings. Like I don't know, I like it. So what's in it?
Yeah.
Overall, would you say it's pleasant?
It's very pleasant.
Yes.
It's just it makes you want to keep smelling it. Like, I just
yes.
you kind of want to lean into it and just allow yourself to be enveloped. I like it.
Mission accomplished.
So what's in it?
Yeah, I mean the full formula it's secret, but the very broad outline, the 5,000 feet view. So the name is called Hedonium Shockwave. The conceptual idea is like, okay, let's make the most pleasant sensation possible, but make it explosive. Like something that like you smell it and you feel this sense of like it's accelerating, it's like expanding somehow, but it's very pleasant and it's not like overwhelming. Hedonium philosophically is like this hypothetical configuration of matter and energy that maximizes bliss. And so there's like the idea of like, well, maybe in the future in thousands of years we might create a hedonium shockwave to transform the universe into a sea of pleasure. Whether that's desirable or not, it depends on who you ask, but it's an interesting theoretical possibility. But yeah, the backbone of this is this combination that I once tried by chance, and I just thought like, there's actually something really interesting about this, which is a pear and violet. That just synergizes in a very pleasant way that is more than the sum of the parts. As an aside, there's actually kind of like a nice hobby that I do, which is that when there's like a new occasion, a new event or a party or something, and I want to create like a very faithful memory of it, I will oftentimes like just combine two aroma chemicals that I've never smelled together and just like spray myself with it. So like throughout that evening, like I formed that memory. It's like, okay, that combination has never existed before. And if I make it again, like 5 years in the future, I know, like, okay, it brings me back exactly to that day. And so in the New Year's Day for 2020, I combined pear and violet without any idea how it would smell, and I just like fell in love with it. And it's like, okay, like then for a year or so, I was thinking like, well, okay, if I really want to make a pear violet perfume, and I want to make it like as beautiful as possible. And so that's I did spend like a couple of months like really trying to perfect the formula. And it's actually been perfected even further by Eliade, the volunteer. So this is kind of like version 4.0 or something like that.
It seems like it has more of an after effect than the other two. Like I feel like I can still smell it. Maybe it's just in the room at this point, but it's kind of shifting. It's got
after trails
of sun.
Nice.
But it is interesting how this relates to what you were saying earlier about.
We didn't do the smelling salts yet.
Because I was going to say, like, smells can take you a little bit in some direction, but they're not just massive changes from whatever baseline. Like, all of these are very pleasant, and I can feel the shift as I smell them to like a slight plus, right?
Yes.
But I'm not just I'm standing on the top of the roof screaming about this is the best experience that I've ever had in my entire life. And it's hard to imagine a smell that could do that.
Yeah. It's not MDMA.
Yeah. And so I think that there is some aspect of it where it complements experiences and like helps shape them and like pushes them forward.
If you're open to smelling one more.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit sad for the audience because they'll have to buy the perfume, but
promo code DemystifySci.
We can take $1,000 off of the perfume. This one is called Eau de Cologne Vide. The idea behind this one is let's make a perfume that is 100% the reverb effect. So it doesn't have a flavor, it doesn't have a tactile element, it just has like a modifier. It's almost try to make a song with just reverb, essentially. It's kind of the idea.
That's really interesting.
Alrighty.
I actually tried that the other day with like a low frequency oscillator on just a reverb source, and it sounded like birds actually.
Oh, interesting.
With some resonance on it.
What is that?
It almost smells like paint to me or something.
This one's much sharper than the other ones. Like it has like a finer point to it. Somehow.
Yeah, it does have like a sharp edge.
Yeah, it reminds me of like some like products. Like my dad used to. He was a stone carver, and he makes like bronze casts of statues, and they use all these crazy chemicals.
Oh, it does have some kind of like
varnish almost.
Like I say this as somebody who loves the smell of solvents.
Yeah.
It has a little bit of an undertone of solvent, but with like something sweet, some kind of flower in there.
Yeah.
I love it.
Nice. Yeah.
It just takes me right back to my childhood, though.
Oh, wow. Well, that's what reverb does, I guess. It is a very romantic sound, reverb. It kind of washes you out, sends you on a journey.
So there's this genre of music called like noise music, right? Like Japan noise. And like, I think this might be kind of in that space, but for scents. Kind of.
Much more pleasant, though.
More pleasant. Yeah, much more pleasant. Yes.
Okay, what's in this one?
Yeah. It is. I mean, it really is made to kind of like confuse the senses because, like, it has like the backbone of lavender without the flavor of lavender. It also has like which is kind of this like volatile kind of like almost kind of like a solvent-like alcohol quality, but it's more about kind of like creating kind of the like space and depth of the smell. But usually that comes with like the sweetness and herbal quality of lavender is like the thing that enhances, whereas here it doesn't have anything to enhance. So it's just kind of like this free-floating kind of like, volatility. But it also has like the softness of rose without the flavor of rose. It's a very beautiful molecule called phenylethyl alcohol. which are, I mean, this is like something like 20% phenyl ethyl alcohol. It's a very big component of it. And then it has the kind of like the spiciness component of very common spices, like the sort of thing that you might find in like cardamom, coriander, what is it called? Oregano, but without the flavor notes of those spices. So it's kind of like the background backbone of flowers together with the background backbone of spices, but without any of the flavors that make any of that characteristic.
As we sit here, it's evolving. Like the volatility, something's burning off, and it starts to smell darker over time.
Mm-hmm.
It's my very technical opinion on the matter.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for indulging me.
Well done.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so, do you sell all of the kinds, or just a certain subset?
Right now, there's like 6 of them in sale. So all of the ones that I've shown you are on sale. I mean, at some point I want to actually like be able to sell like a much broader variety, and I get more reasonable prices. This really is just kind of like a bootstrapping operation, like getting enough funding to do the proper research, and then eventually, and also like QRI, the long-term vision for like things such as like all of the software that we're using to visualize, psychedelic experiences and meditation, and all of that is, the long-term goal is for that to be like open source and like available to as many people as possible, right? So I don't want to sound like a greedy capitalist, like asking for like this price for these perfumes, but it's a bootstrapping process essentially.
I mean, I think that it makes a lot of sense, like to offer something that's unique and so custom, like it's something that comes from you and from the people that are working on this, where it's like it's almost not necessarily for the sake of selling the perfumes. It's like for the sake of building the project. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Should we do the smelling club?
Well, I wanted to even before that, like something I didn't get a chance to show.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, which is like maybe one cool feature about one of these simulations, and then like some of the animations that are actually very accurate for different psychedelic states. These, I don't know, can the camera see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. The key thing here is like it's almost kind of like 2 hemispheres. You can imagine the left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and right now, each of these sides is trying to imitate the other, and so you end up kind of like cohering into a pattern that is like the same on both sides, even though actually the parameters are not identical in both. So conceptually, what this illustrates is like, hey, when you're like in a similar state as somebody else, you can vibe with them, right? You can actually exchange vibes. If I make the parameters like different enough, like, okay, hey, they can't cohere anymore, or like that's sort of like, well, one person is drunk and the other is sober, and then like the vibes are just not going through very well between them. But if you have like half a drink or like your similar level of drunkenness, like, okay, then the vibes can like transmit from one to the other. But then where it gets like really interesting is when one side is trying to be the same as the other, and the other is trying to be as different as possible. Because then you get kind of this like chase dynamic, right? Like, and any pattern that one side comes up with, the other is going to try to imitate it, and then the first one is going to try to like do something else. So this is kind of like a chaos generator. Like in a bunch of these parameters, essentially, the pattern just kind of like never quite converges, and you have kind of like this like endless generation of chaos. I'm not sure if this is the correct parameters for that in particular, but maybe if I can, something like this. Let me adjust it briefly. Where it's it's trying to do a spiral, but like it doesn't quite cohere into a spiral. And I think the sense of like entities on DMT in particular, I think it involves this, like that on 5-MeO DMT, where you cohere into like God consciousness, everything is one. Is like all of the systems, they're trying to track each other. They're trying to kind of cohere. Whereas like psilocybin and DMT, I think actually the state is much more like, hey, one part of the system is trying to be different than another one, and the other is trying to imitate. And so you have like this endless generation of chaos. And so that is one kind of like one big piece of the puzzle, we suspect, is asymmetries in whether two systems want to couple together or if one wants to be different than the other.
Did you like get the? I didn't get that, I guess. So
Okay,
like basically,
yeah.
I understand the principle of like trying to cohere versus trying to do something different. How did you map that onto the substances? Which substances are trying to cohere?
Oh, 5-MeO-DMT, which is the God molecule, and also like MDMA, I would say. Like these two molecules, they kickstart a kind of like dynamic coupling network that everything wants to be part of the same dynamic. All of the bees are trying to do the same thing, as it were. Whereas on psilocybin or on DMT or ayahuasca, I think actually you become kind of like fragmented into various clusters, where the clusters may have like asymmetrical relationships with each other. Like this part is trying to imitate or make sense of this part, but this part doesn't like the other one. And so it's going to try to kind of like sneak around and do something different that the other one cannot predict. In other words, you become kind of like fragmented into various factions, each of which has like different preferences and desires, and how much they each like each other may be asymmetrical.
But with a high enough dose, it sounds like it coheres again.
To some extent. I mean, like, the thing is, like, even very high dose DMT, for the most part, you continue to have checkerboard patterns everywhere. Like, there's still kind of this dynamic of like every region is trying to be kind of opposite to their neighbors. It's just that sometimes you may encounter kind of like fairly stable kind of attractors where every part has that property, but as a whole is somewhat stable. So like, meeting Jesus, so to speak, in ayahuasca, it is not usually kind of like a clean sense of emptiness or pure space or just the spirit. That is 5-MeO-DMT. I mean, like 5-MeO-DMT is like at the limit, it may all converge into like infinite space. And there's just like nothing else. It's just the void. Whereas like DMT, it may converge on, well, you're in a hyperdimensional space where there's like a lot of checkerboard patterns, but all the checkerboard patterns are pointing in the same direction. And so you may have kind of Jesus at the center, but that Jesus is being reflected off of like all of these other things that do have a lot of structure. And it's a very complex configuration. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it maps onto what you were saying earlier about the fact that DMT feels more chaotic than 5-MeO does.
Yes, exactly.
Makes a lot of sense.
And then, yeah, just to hint at like kind of like the high end of what we're doing in terms of or I think like okay. I think he wanted to ask us actually if you guys wanted something to eat. We can like DoorDash or something for actually.
I think that the plan was to go to the gym maybe after this.
Okay.
Yeah, we might. There's a place in on the other side of the bay that I have in mind.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm hopeful about
but
this.
that's very kind.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So let me show you. Yeah, I mean, like the high end kind of like replications look more like this. So these patterns are essentially coming entirely out of like a dynamic system that we built with several layers, and like it's the same idea of like coupled oscillators, except that we're doing it in the GPU, so it's like way faster, and actually we can associate a coupled oscillator to each of the pixels, and you see like the diversity of patterns is just extraordinary. Right, like and these, for example, I would say this is like much more of a kind of like a DMT configuration than like psilocybin, for example. And so you see, like this is kind of like the level of complexity that we are trying to get at these days. And it's all completely bottom up, right? Like these are not like filters or Photoshop or anything like that. This is completely emergent out of like these dynamic systems that we're programming. And so like part of the research today that we're doing is asking, very experienced psychonauts to essentially rate each of these images by how LSD-like it is, how DMT-like it is, and so on. I'll show you like one that is very, very highly rated for psilocybin, and maybe like we can conclude with that just so that you have like, at least like a general sense of like what is it that the QRI is doing.
Yeah, I think that's really cool, and it makes sense that if there is some kind of harmonic process that's happening in the brain, that if you can, because I assume that what you're using to produce these images is some kind of like harmonic mathematics of waves and color.
Yes.
And so if you can produce that same visual field, then it lends itself to the idea that perhaps it is what's happening in the brain. Because with the QRI stuff, the question that I always have is, how does this connect to what's actually happening in the brain, right? Because there's a ton of theory, and the theory seems reasonable and logical and deeply underpins like my own experience, and like it does seem very harmonic, and all the brainwave stuff too.
That's exactly right. I mean, like the big picture is something like there is the very low level like neurotransmitter concentrations, which then at some other level, like maybe at the level of like 10,000 neurons, then you get the coupling dynamics. And then at the level of the entire brain, depending on the coupling dynamics, you get these like macroscopic resonant modes. And so effectively what we're doing now with this research is like by asking people to rate different coupling dynamics as a function of how similar they are to different states of consciousness, we can reverse engineer how the microcircuitry of the neural network generated those coupling dynamics. And then we want to see if that actually confirms, things such as like, hey, like psilocybin has this particular receptor affinity profile. And if those are actually a match, then we finally bridge experience to neurochemistry. So that is like the research roadmap ahead, effectively, like finding that path, that link between neurochemistry all the way to like macroscopic resonant modes.
That's very cool. And it finally will settle the question of how is it that psychedelics cause these effects?
Yes.
Through just serotonin receptors.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so what is this?
Oh, this is one of the top scorers for psilocybin. It's a little bit short, so I'll just like play it again.
Interesting.
So like this one scores like really high for psilocybin, but not for LSD and DMT, for example. And I suspect that, there's probably some like really good reasons why. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Shelly, what do you think? Does it
checks out? I mean, the psilocybin, the closest thing that I've experienced, I guess, is like seeing faces in the bark of trees in the woods, that kind of thing, which this looks a little bit like you can start to see maybe some new versions of the dog kind of appearing, something like that.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, that is true, because like for me with psilocybin, it's very much like I begin to see spirits everywhere, like dryads and tree spirits. I had this very strong experience in the desert where we were walking along this wash, and I looked, there was this part that was hollowed and there was a tree root in it. And I look, and the root is this wizened old lady who's like waiting for the rains to come back. And so I have these like very visceral creature experiences, but I don't necessarily know if they're visual hallucinations. In the sense of like, because with LSD, it's like there's geometric, colorful things like pinwheels, and things are spinning and flowing and everything's in motion. But with psilocybin, it's more, I feel like I see spirits.
Okay.
I feel like that's not what people mostly report.
I mean, in our framework, I mean, like we have seen kind of a little bit of this pattern where probably like the factor of like how much somebody's interested in things versus interested in people probably influences a little bit kind of like their psychedelic experiences, where more people-oriented people, I think they're more likely to actually like see like faces and like semantic content. Whereas like somebody like Stephen Lehar, one of the neuroscientists who's part of our lineages, and he explores psychedelia very deeply. He says he never saw like any faces in his trips, for example. It was all just kind of like mechanisms and like gears and stuff like that. And to me, that is like what we call like some of the energy sinks, the semantic energy sinks. Is like you are predisposed to interpret sensory input with some perceptual filters. And then on psychedelics, you have like all of this as excess energy. And then, you have like the perceptual filters to function as energy sinks. And so in some sense, like what is more accessible to you will have a lot to do with like what energy sinks you practice on the daily basis and what is your default mode of approaching the world.
That's really fascinating. I think that checks out. I'm definitely people oriented.
Nice.
I like that.
Okay. Yeah. So I can take the bath salts.
Let's close it down with the. Let's close it down with some.
Smelling
first experience.
Bath salts. There's smelling salts.
Bath salts is.
Bath salts is bad. We'll see eating each other's faces.
Bath salts is like cheap drugs in hotels.
So if you buy from gas stations.
A2.
All right. So I think that needs to add water or something.
What's it say on the bottom?
Yeah. What does it say?
Word smelling salts. Bottled insanity. Ammonia inhalants. Oh my god, I'm so nervous.
We just open it and take it.
Hold on, there's instructions maybe. Sodium carbonate. Do not remove cotton ball. Add 1 teaspoon of water using the spoon provided.
Huh.
Close lid tightly and shake well. Uncap, sniff, perform.
All right. Yeah.
There's a scoop inside of there.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go put a scoop of water.
Yeah.
Scoop of water, I guess.
I'm nervous.
Yeah.
I'm very nervous.
Have you done this before?
Yes. Not with that one. I mean, this is new, right? But like somebody has shown me and it was very, very, very intense. So.
All right, here we go.
There's like steam coming out of it.
Not too intense.
Wow, that's incredible.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe I didn't take a big enough whiff. I mean. Yeah? Interesting. Am I just broken or something? Wow, what if this is like my newfound talent? I can just do smelling salts, no problem.
It's like...
It's not too intense for me. What's wrong with me?
I mean, it's like, it's incredible.
I kind of like it, actually. I think I found my newest addiction. What the heck?
Wow.
Whoa.
It's crazy.
I mean, for me, it's automatic reaction. I can't control it.
And your Shiloh's just fine. Put your nose in there real good. Oh, I got it.
Oh my god. Okay.
All right, one more time. This is bad.
All right.
It feels like it might be bad for you.
Like neuron cell. Okay, I just didn't.
Oh, it's got such a burn on it. It's like.
One more. Oh, there it is. Oh. Okay, all right. I have experience just Jimi Hendrix and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, that really does.
All right, guys. I think we should put a bow on this thing. Yeah, Andrés, thanks for having us out to your house, man.
You're so welcome.
Amazing. It's really cool. I'm glad we got to hang out with you. And you are the first of our live podcasts, so congratulations.
Yeah. No, I love this stuff. I think that you're doing something that's really cool for the world, and I feel like we've been talking to you for a couple years now, and so we get to see it grow. And awesome. I loved having you at Paradigm Drift too, so thank you for supporting us.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, love your show, and all the best with everything that's to come. Yes.
Indeed. Let's hang out, not on camera sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, infinite bliss, everybody.